pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Does our student rep have any announcements this evening?
There are no announcements this evening.
And there's Mark right there. Thank you for joining us again this evening. As a reminder to all, we are here to focus on our agenda items. Please remember that due to the governor's mandate restricting indoor group meetings to 25, and that which does not allow for any percentage of any room capacity, the best way to participate in a Springford School Board meeting is by watching on YouTube or Zoom. This meeting is not open for in-person attendance beyond a total of 25. At the start of the meeting, members of the public may comment on agenda items only. The school board will move through the meeting agenda, then at the end, the microphone will again be open for public comment. In order to meet the requirements of PA's sunshine laws, it's necessary to record the names and addresses of all individuals who speak to the school board during the meeting. To assure compliance with this requirement, it is essential that those planning to address the school board through Zoom use the raise hand feature, and when prompted, state their full name and address. Members of the audience are asked to limit their comments to 3 minutes. We did say 3 minutes last week to allow time for all those who wish to speak. We did say that we would cap that at an hour on the opening, but not on the end, so that we can get to the agenda. If time at any point does not permit you to comment, you can always email your comments to boardcomment@springford.net, and they will be reviewed and included in the official meeting minutes. The purpose of this is to allow the school board to move on to agenda items. And with that, do we have any public to be heard on agenda items only this evening? Chief Boyer, are you making a comment as a public?
Yeah, we have 9 people outside. They have a copy of that current court order for the restrictions from the governor, excuse me. And I conferred with our solicitor whether or not to make a decision you guys might like to about whether to let them in or not.
And Mr. Fitzgerald, is that order in effect for us in this area, or what is the current legal standing?
Right. Well, for background, just in case individuals are not aware, the Federal District Court for the Western District of Pennsylvania issued an order today specific to a series of Governor Wolf's various orders from May, June, and July surrounding stay-at-home, business restrictions, and gathering restrictions. Plaintiffs included a number of counties, the lead county being Butler County, Pennsylvania. So the decision was a broad rebuke of the governor's orders specific to violations of the First Amendment, equal protection, and the like. The order, however, is binding only on essentially a third of the state. It's binding on the Western District. I suspect this will likely be appealed to the Third Circuit. Now, if the Third Circuit upholds the decision, then we have a situation where we have to comply with the Third Circuit. At this point, just based on all the moving targets, the only thing that's binding on us right now is that order, but by the governor. The decision by the Western District is not. It's something to certainly be noteworthy of, but it's not binding yet on.
Chief, it's only 9 people.
That's what I understand, 9. I haven't gone out myself, but I believe Officer Del Romano.
If it's 9 people, I say just let them in.
I say we get to 25 and cap it. So however many we have now, that portion of that, whatever group is out there, to 25, and then bring them in.
I make a motion to allow the 9 people in.
Second that motion.
Questions or comments on that? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
Can we do a roll call on that? Because I don't know if it came across clear, because I don't know who voted yes.
We will.
Who
Ms.
voted
Fern,
no.
do you want to do the roll call, or do you want me to do it here? You're muted. I can't hear you, Ms. Fern. You're muted. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, there I am. I can do the roll call vote. I'm assuming all board members are there. I don't have a clear view of the entire table. Are all board members there?
Yes, everyone's here.
Okay. Mr. Schaefer?
I voted to let him in.
Mr. Jackson? Mr. DeBello?
Yes.
Mrs. Zazowski?
No.
Mrs. Melton?
No.
Mrs. Vizzini?
No.
Ms. Sullivan? Ms. Sullivan?
No.
Mrs. Earl?
No.
It's five. I missed someone. Did I miss someone?
Yeah, Dr. Wright.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Wright.
No.
Okay, the vote is 6-3 in favor of no.
Thank you, Chief Lawyer. So is there any public to be heard in the audience here on agenda items only?
I have one comment on the ad hoc committee. As part of the going back to school effort for the
Sir,
parents.
You have to state your name and address, sir.
Oh, sorry. My name is David Belair and I live in 11 Derby Circle in Collegeville, PA. So as part of the going back to school effort, parent and guardians need to understand what procedures and steps the school district is taking to prevent the spread of COVID-19 while they're on premise in school. Documenting these procedures and preventative steps that have already been decided is an easy task. This document could be shared so that all the parents know what is being done to prevent it. This could also help them decide and encourage them to bring their kid to school. Stating that you're following the CDC guidelines is not enough. We need to know exactly what is being done so that they can be more comfortable with sending their kids to school. Having people be more comfortable with bringing their kids to school will probably have more people want to participate. And I think it would be very important to get that done and complete. That's it.
Thank you. Any other board or public comment?
Hi, Mary Jo McNamara, 187 Abbey Drive, Royersford, PA. I'll be brief. I don't know why the project management discussion is number 8, the last thing on the agenda tonight, when it's the most important thing I think many of your community will say to speak about. And I also wanted to just commend, speaking about the ad hoc committee, how well it went and the ability to have interaction among the community without restrictions was a really positive experience. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the audience inside the room? Okay. Are there any hands raised? Mr. Catalano, are there any hands raised?
Yes. Well, there was, and now it's not. So of our 152 attendees, there are no hands raised at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have a presentation now on the agenda, an update on the return to school for students with special needs. Mr. Rizzo.
Good evening, directors. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to listen to our special education supervisors tonight as they present the plan that we're going to be hopefully rolling forward in the upcoming weeks and months. Starting with, you met them all before, they're all here. Starting with our grade 10 through 12 special ed supervisor, Mr. David Krakauer, and then grades 7 to 9, Mrs. Katie Davis, grades 4 to 6, Dr. Purcell Whitaker, and then grades K to 3, Miss Amy Hiller. I'll turn it over to Mr. Krakauer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rizzo. Oh, that seems a little loud. Is that loud? Am I loud? Thanks again, Mr. Rizzo. Thank you very much to the school board directors for allowing us to speak again to provide another update for the Springford School District in regards to special education. So Rich, as I continue to progress through the slides here, I'll just ask you to move to the next slide for me, please. Okay. All right, Rich, next slide, please. So we thought it was important to highlight where we are as of today. So our current in-person programming, there are 3 bulleted items on the PowerPoint. 1, currently our career and technical education students are receiving in-person instruction. And that is not only for students with disabilities, but also our general education students are receiving in-person instruction. The other bullet that's up there is our psychologists have started testing our students for evaluations and reevaluations. This started during the week of September 1st. And so far, all has gone well. They are seeing multiple students during the course of the week to continue with their evaluations and reevaluations. Our low incidence classrooms. Today was our first in-person instruction day for students in our low incidence classrooms. We had 114 students present today out of 166 students. So roughly about 69% of our families chose to be in person in our low incidence classrooms. I feel like I just need to take a quick moment to thank a lot of people in regard for today to happen, from our teachers to our instructional assistants, to our administrative team, to our food services personnel, to transportation, to our secretarial staff in the buildings. There was a lot of planning to make today possible for our students to return in the building. And I thought right now was the appropriate time to thank everyone. Today was great. The students, when they came off the buses, they were ecstatic, lots of smiles. The first student arrived this morning at roughly about 7:15. And when she got out of the car from her mom dropping her off, she was literally jumping up and down in excitement that she was back in school. So all in all, at all levels, K to 12, things went well today. And there are a lot of people that made today happen. So I thought it was the right time to thank a lot of different groups with all the planning that took place. Next slide, please. So the next slide is in regards to our next phase of in-person program and instruction for special education. If you remember when I spoke in early August, we did discuss having a phase-in approach or a tiered approach of bringing our students with disabilities back into the building. So as you'll see, as I continue to talk here, that is our plan as a district as we continue to move forward to slowly bring some students back into the building. So our tiered level of support for students include learning support, emotional support, autistic support, multiple disability support, life skills support, hearing support, and vision support. And these supports will continue as we move through each phase. So before I get into the dates and grade spans and expectations, I thought it was important just to explain what itinerant, supplemental, and full-time level special ed support services mean, just so everyone had a good understanding of me using some of this terminology as throughout the presentation. So when we talk about our full-time students, those are students that are receiving less than 20% of their days included in the general education class. So roughly about 20% of their day would be in gen education. Supplemental level of students, they receive about 20% of their day, between 20 and 80% of the day is in the special education classroom. So they are receiving some type of special ed services and supports as a supplemental level student. Our itinerant level of students, they receive about 20% or less of their day of special education services and supports. So that just gives you an idea if you hear me mention full-time students to supplemental students to itinerant level of students. As you can see on the bottom there, we do want to state that the dates that we are presenting tonight are subject to change. And as I get through the PowerPoint, we'll explain some reasons why they may be subject to change. So our next date to bring in person students would be October 8th. We would be looking at bringing K to 4 supplemental students in first, and that would be for a full day. Just to give you an idea of roughly how many students we're talking about K to 4. It is 98 students. A few days later, October 12th, 2020, we would look to move to 5 to 12 students receiving supplemental level of support for a full day. To give you an idea, per level, 68 students in the 5th and 6th grade, 44 7th, 25 8th, 22 and 9th, and 79 10 to 12. And again, these are roundabout numbers that I'm providing you tonight. And then a week later, on October 19th, we would look to bring in our K to 4 itinerant students for a full day. And roughly, itinerant level students, K to 4, is 126 students. And then a few days later, again, October 22nd, we would be looking to bring in our 5 to 12 itinerant level students. And again, by grade span, 5-6 is 100 students, 7th is 65, 8th grade is 81, 9th grade is 85, and 10th to 12th is 217. So if I would combine all three areas of our full-time students and low incidence that started today, our supplemental level of students and our itinerant level of students, that would roughly be about 1,176 students that we'd be looking to possibility of bringing in by October 22nd. One reason why we started October 8th and we spaced out a few days in between our tiered rollout is to be able to deploy anything service-wise, whether it's technology, whether it's curriculum, whether it's ourselves. We felt it was important to have all the necessary resources to be able to deploy K to 4 in case we needed to problem solve any areas. So that's one reason why we went with a tiered approach throughout the course of October. Next slide, please. So I mentioned on the previous slide that the dates are subject to change, and these are some reasons and some considerations for why we might have to change some dates. So when we take a look at staffing, teachers and instructional assistants, we need to make sure we have enough staff in the building to be able to implement each phase of our plan. Substitutes, we feel like we are going to need substitutes. There may be some of our staff that have to request a leave. Those staff have been asked to reach out to human resources if a leave is necessary. Nurse needs. Right now with our low incidence classrooms, we are not using 4 elementary school buildings. So in order to implement our plan, we would need additional nurses because right now in each one of our buildings that are being utilized, we do have a nurse in the nurses suite and a nurse in health annex. And then as part of our health and safety plan for nursing needs. Another consideration that we continue to work through is technology needs for K to 6. As you all know, we are 1-to-1, 7 to 12. So the technology concerns are not that great 7 to 12 because we are 1-to-1 with Chromebooks. But not all of our students in K to 6 right now have 1-to-1 devices. Transportation needs to fall into place for the different tiers. And we have worked very closely with Chief Boyer. And gloves and sneeze guards are two areas of PPE that we are waiting for. The gloves are expected to be in, I believe, in the next week. We do have gloves currently in our low incidence classrooms, but to have enough gloves to start incorporating more students for our staff and students if need be is something that we needed to put under for consideration. So these are considerations that many of them we've already started throughout our planning process. So as far as substitutes and nurse needs and notifying staff and teachers and instructional assistants of the plan for a tiered plan. Next slide, please. So we thought it was important to be transparent with their community and the school board of what a typical day of in-person instruction would look like. So a typical day of in-person instruction for students may include the following. And the key word here is may. They could receive live in-person special education services instruction. Students attending classes virtually in Canvas. with teacher support, instructional assistant support, or in a study hall. And I want to talk a little bit to the first two bulleted items, just because depending on how many staff we have in the building through the different tiers, will depend on, I'll use me for an example. If I was in 4 general education classes and 3 of my gen ed teachers are teaching in the building, I would be able to go to their class directly for my classes. At that time, I would have to participate still remotely on the computer because the teachers will still have to teach to the computer. And the teachers that are in the building, they also would have to have, while they're teaching to the computer, they also have their mask on. So our students that would be in the classes, and that could be a regular ed class or a special ed classroom, they would have their devices out with their headphones on, and they would be participating with their headphones on. Now, the educational benefit comes when that teacher is done with the live instruction piece. And let's say there were 10 or 15 minutes left in the class, our students can gain the educational benefit of getting that individualized instruction or extra support that they needed. Or on the asynchronous days where the teacher on Monday did a 45-minute live lesson, but on Tuesday, it's an asynchronous activity and some independent work that might be given. Our students that are in person, again, that educational benefit of receiving that in-person support in the instruction that they're being provided. And for my example of Dave, for my 4th period, if Mr. Fitzgerald is not in the building and he is my history teacher, we would have to have study halls set up in the building for students to go for supervision to participate in their class. So an example here at the high school would be the Herta Learning Center. It's a large enough space that we'd be able to spread out. It's conducive to learning where students could put their laptop on the table. And we would need to make sure that we have supervision in the Herta Learning Center for the possibility of 20 or 30, 40 students if we're able to keep the 6 feet distance in the Herta Learning Center. So that's what a day typically could look like when we start to incorporate more students within the classroom. And we do need to be mindful of our teachers because they still would be teaching to the computer while they do have some students within their classroom. Our goal for related services in regards to speech, OT, PT, counseling, we want to do our best to try to provide that in person as much as we can. And I forgot to mention earlier that through our tiered level support, we would still be 4 days a week. It would still be a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday option of being in person. And Wednesday would be similar to what's happening now with the rest of the school district. So related services, we would do the best we can to provide as many of the related services in person. And we just put a little note on there. I talked about that on a previous slide that, contingent upon staffing on what a student's day would look like. Next slide, please. So next steps. We did send out a survey in early August to all the families with students with disabilities. We feel like it's important to get some updated data. I can share some results in regards to that survey in early August. Here it is. So we had 1,287 families fill out the survey. At that time, 730 opted for in-person instruction. So we feel like it's been about 5 weeks or so since we collected that data. We felt it was important to send another survey out so we can get a better idea if families have changed their minds, whether they changed their mind of in-person or virtual. We did see that with our low incidence families, that some families, as we did get closer to today, did change their mind of in-person or virtual. So we feel like that's important as a next step. I talked about next steps with staffing needs, transportation needs, communication with parents. The survey is scheduled to go out tomorrow. Also with a link to the presentation tonight so everyone can get a good understanding of what we're presenting here. Continue to assess and evaluate programming and make changes as necessary. And the last bullet, I didn't talk much about tonight, but we felt like it was important to have this be a part of our presentation. So in transparency with our community and the board, that we have had conversations of consideration with students with 504 plans. And our ELL students, where do they fall within the continuum? Through our administrative meetings and planning and preparing for our students with disabilities, these two areas have been brought up. When's the right time? Where do they fit into the continuum? And those conversations will continue as we progress here over the next couple of weeks. So that is the end of our presentation, and we'll take any questions that the school board might have.
I was wondering, as far as the backlog of evaluations, are we making some headway with those?
Great question. It's going to be a while before we make some really good headway. I can't remember, you know the exact number roughly? Okay. We started with roughly about 175 evaluations at the start of the school year. We did ask the psychologists that typical year, to start the school year, they're usually below 10. So that gives you an idea of the volume of testing and students that need to be seen. And those are only from last school year. We still have 3-year anniversary dates that are coming up, the students that are going to be due this year for reevaluations, and that doesn't include any new initial evaluation requests that we receive here in the next few months.
I think at your last presentation, I made a request to let the board know what you needed to alleviate this backlog.
Mm-hmm.
Was that request was put forth to us?
Yes, and you approved additional psychologist support.
So what else do you need to expedite this backlog? Hey, we're all big boys and girls here, so if you need help, you got to tell us.
Yeah, I think at this point, we have tremendous psychologists that just got started with their testing. We do have approval for additional psychologist funds. And I think I did state this in early August, that every district in the Commonwealth is facing what we're facing. So to go out there and be able to find 10 school psychologists that are available right now is pretty slim. So I think we'll have a better handle here in the next couple of weeks once the psychologist starts seeing some students, and then be able to provide us an update on how much headway they're making with their caseload. So I think what you provided to us in August, it was great. We appreciate it. Our school psychologists were very thankful. They thanked us multiple times. They thanked you as well. So I think right now we just need to allow our psychologists to continue to test some students. We have the additional help that's on the way, and that's going to help out a lot.
All right, thank you.
So I have a question too before you, whoever can, well, maybe, it doesn't matter. I guess I have a question about the students that, I guess during their regular ed class that would be in a study hall per se and working virtually through their regular classes. Is there staff there that's helping them when they need that extra help, or really just monitoring it? How does that work out?
So that's all going to depend on who's in the building at the time of our tiered level of support. So the example I provided earlier, if I had Mr. Fitzgerald as a history teacher and Mr. Fitzgerald was not able to work in the building on October 12th, I would have to report to, let's just per se, I would go to the Herta Learning Center, and I would still have to participate remotely. The teachers in their primary focus would just be the supervision piece. You know, at the high school level, would they have opportunities to get additional support? We do. We have our study support room, and our two ladies that provide support in there are here in the building. So there would be opportunities, but we felt that we needed to be transparent on what that would look like, because students wouldn't be walking into Springford High School pre-COVID, where it was live, where there was classmates, that there would be a possibility that we would have to develop these study halls within the buildings for supervision purposes.
All right, thank you.
So,
I had two questions. I guess one in follow-up to Mr. Jackson.
when we meet again in 2 weeks, Dr. Gooden, would you be able to bring to us kind of an idea of where we are so that we have an idea of timeline and what we're looking at in terms of how long it'll take us to get through this backlog of 175? I think that'll give us a month into school when we meet again in 2 weeks. So that'll give us at least a little bit of an idea of what we're looking at from a timing perspective. The other question I had was with regards to GIEPs. And what are we doing when it comes to our gifted students who also have IEPs and what kind of support are we offering them, or is there anything that we're doing to assist them as we're in this virtual setting?
So as of right now, students that just solely have a GIEP, we have no intentions of bringing them in October. We have discussed students with GIEPs. We do have students within the district that are duly identified. They have a GIEP and an IEP. And if a student is duly identified, they would fall into our tiered level of support that we just shared with you in October. But as of right now, our intentions are not to bring GIEP students in for the month of October. Could that change moving forward? Maybe at the beginning of November, that's a possibility. But right now, our intentions are not for October.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. I believe Dr. Witter had a comment about psychologists.
Jumped out of my skin here. Good evening. I just wanted to be clear about the school psychologist, so full transparency. A school psychologist has 60 calendar days to complete their evaluation. Regardless of the backlog, they still are entitled legally to 60 calendar days. And they need those days because we're required to complete a comprehensive assessment that evaluates all areas of suspected disability. So I just want to be clear about that, so there's no expectation they're going to get these done in 2 weeks. Okay. All right, thank you.
So I have a quick question. When I saw the schedule, an amount of time that it's spread out to bring these students in, I'm a little concerned because these are students with special needs. These are students that require a lot, from the school district. We're there to provide a service. We're there to help the parents to be part of their lives. And I was kind of disheartened to see the amount of time that it's going to take to bring that student population into the school. And when I went through the presentation, I'm not really sure why.
So through our meetings administratively, we felt like October 8th was the earliest that we can do our next tiered level of support. When we first started to have conversations, we talked about spreading it out even more, where we're looking at 2 weeks in between different tiers. So in this presentation, with some of the things that do need to fall in place administratively, we looked at October 8th, and then within a 2-week period of time, we are now looking to bring in the majority of our special education students. Where prior, we were looking at a further out period of time where it was 2 weeks in between our next phase tiers. So you can see here, we go October 8th, and then we're a couple days later. So from October 8th to, I think it was the 19th or the 22nd, within the 2-week period of time, we would be bringing in all of our students with disabilities.
I guess the reason I bring this up is because, and again, I'm sure the administration hears this all the time, and because I'm hearing it all the time. Other school districts are doing the same thing we're doing when it comes to students with special needs, and some districts have already brought in the lion's share of the students. And how do I answer the question? We're Springford. How do I answer the question when other districts are doing this and we can't, and we're not? I don't want to say we can't. That's not the right word. We're not.
Yeah, from the county meetings that we participated in, and you guys can speak up if I'm not correct, but we're pretty much in alignment with happening within the rest of the county. There are some districts that haven't even started to bring in their low incidence students where we have. There are some students that are only bringing their low incidence classrooms in for a couple hours a day. So while I understand your point, I think through our meetings, we're in alignment with what's happening throughout the county. I know Mr. Fitzgerald has worked with other school districts. We've worked closely with legal in regards to this. I think just through administratively, we think October 8th is a good target date to have some of those considerations fall into place. And I can't sit here today and give you 110% commitment that all those considerations are going to fall into place. I think our goal with the administrative team was to try to get the students with disabilities in as quick as we can, but also to make sure we're doing it in the safest way possible. So today was a big first step for our district where our low incidence students were in the buildings. And, you know, we'll continue to plan moving forward to bring additional students in.
To underscore what Mr. DeBello said, and I'll ask this question again. Is there anything that the board can do to assist you with this? Or are you comfortable with where you're at right now? You got to learn to take help.
Mr. Jackson, I'll tell you, for the last 5-6 months, I haven't really been comfortable with a lot of things that we've been doing because things change on a daily basis. So for me to sit up here, I appreciate you asking that question. I feel like right now, those considerations that I put up there in regards to identifying our staff, our instructional assistants, Mrs. Lease has already reached out for substitutes. She's already reached out for nurses. So those conversations have been happening. I think right now, I wouldn't sit here and tell you, me personally, I'm completely comfortable because I feel like things change on a daily basis. I feel like we're moving in the right direction. We've had a lot of conversations over the last couple of weeks to move forward with this plan. So I think right now we need those things to fall into place to be able to meet those dates that we put up on that slide.
All right, thank you.
Very much like to see the plan. So thank you for sharing that with us and the details of that in a way that we could all understand it also.
I'd like to say thank you and my appreciation for the hard work and Dr. Gooden for all of the administrators. I think from the moment that the decision was made to go virtual, we were looking for a way to help our students, the low incidence students in particular, and working, and this is a step, this is a really great day that you started this, bringing the students back in. So thank you for all the efforts. This is really good.
Just curious, and thank you again. I mean, if the, or how much indigestion, there's a professional term for you, our counselor knows that, would you get if we compress the time frame to sort of accelerate it? I'm just curious how much room we have if, you know, if that direction were given. And I felt compelled to ask you that because that's where my head's at.
Yeah,
I'm trying to lean that way.
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. And I'll get back to the one slide, that first group of the staffing piece. Me personally, I think it's important that we're giving our staff enough time to take care of whatever family situations that they have going on, to be able to give them enough time to prepare for what's coming. And for some of our teachers that have young ones at home, whether that's finding daycare, that's finding a nanny at home, and making preparations for that, that's a big part of what's going to happen next. And then for the staff that do need to take leave, being able to find good quality substitutes that's really going to take care of our kids, our students. Because right now, I know we've had a couple of substitutes that were hard to find, LTSs, for the start of the school year, but HR and administrative, we worked really hard to make that happen. So that staffing piece with the subs and of course the nurses, to be able to open those 4 buildings, we would need additional nurses. And the nurses are hard to come by as well.
So just to focus this conversation, you feel that this timeline that you've given us provides you with the time to get the resources you need to effectively educate the kids who have IEPs and get them in the school safely. Is that?
Administratively, you know, we feel October 8th right now would be a good target date.
I know I get lots and lots and lots and lots of emails from parents. So I'll be curious to hear what feedback you're getting from parents based on this proposed timeline.
You want me to respond to that now or in a few weeks?
Either or.
Okay. Well, I can speak from experience from our first survey of bringing our low incidence classrooms. From the very beginning, when our low incidence families knew that there was a plan, that we were moving forward towards that plan, that there was a date in mind, they were super excited that there was an opportunity to choose whether they wanted in-person or virtual. I can tell you for the families that I've spoken to that receive supplemental or itinerant level of support, I've told them that plans are coming, dates are coming. They were happy of the fact that we are considering bringing more students in person for some services. I can't tell you, Mr. Jackson, that every parent is happy with us that it would be October 8th, because that's not true. Because I have spoken to some unhappy community members that want it sooner. But I've also spoken to community members and our parents that are happy that there's a date in mind, that we're thinking out the process, thinking out the process and what needs to be done to make it happen. And as I talked a little bit about what a typical day would look like, I'm not going to sit up here and tell you that that's ideal, but the fact that the educational benefit of receiving some in-person support and in-person instruction, being in a school building, social and emotional reasons of being in a school building, being able to get into a classroom, those are some things that we didn't talk a whole lot about tonight. We talked about it instructionally, but just a routine of getting on a bus or having their parents drop them off and going to first period and walking in the hallways, that's our kids, that's how they know school. That's how we know school. So I don't want to underestimate that part of it. We didn't talk much about it, but there are benefits on just being in the building, being able to go to room 103, being able to go to room 110, being able to socialize a little bit with my peers, being to socialize in person with my colleagues. And I can tell you, when the teachers were back in the building 2 weeks, I jumped up the opportunity to get out of my office and go have a conversation in the teacher's classroom, because I didn't have to do it via phone and I didn't have to jump on a Zoom call. I can do what we all know pre-COVID is to have a nice conversation face-to-face, obviously socially distancing, but to go see that teacher or staff member.
Right now, you're the smartest person in this room. And the reason why is you talked about the word plan with dates. And it gives parents something to work with. So I sincerely applaud you for that.
I think I'm up there with intelligence, but that's all right. I'm joking. For anybody that has known me, please do not look up my grade transcripts from this fine school as well. I'm just curious. There were a few sort of seemingly staffing obstacles that seem to be the delay to the 4 weeks. And I'm not, Mrs. Lee's not going to put you on the spot here. But if we can identify those, right, and if that's the roadblocks, I mean, can we put together a plan that maybe is, rather than 4 weeks, it's 2 weeks, right? I just think that that's at least that would be, and I'm obviously one member of this board. So, but just leaning towards, let's start with we're in, and then deal with the real issues versus the perception of challenges, right? And move forward with that. And that'll be the last I say on this thing. And thank you very much again for all that you're doing.
Oh, you're welcome.
Does any other board want to comment on that part that Mr. Schaefer suggested about moving up the timeline? Any comments on that further? Okay. All right. Thank you so much for your presentation and for your plan, as Mr. Jackson said. Okay, moving on then from the presentation to board and committee minutes. And Mr. Schaefer, do you have a report for us on the first extracurricular committee meeting of this school year?
I do. Thank you very much. So the extracurricular committee met Tuesday, September the 1st, 7:30 within the high school principal's office and on Zoom. In attendance were all of the board committee members, along with members from staff, Bob Rizzo, Doug Rigner, Mickey McDaniel, Dan Miscavige, Seth Jones, and Mark Moyer. The minutes from the May 5th meeting were approved, and then we had basically 2 updates. And I will say, since this is transitioned to a monthly meeting, we're just going to be sort of, you'll be hearing a similar cadence from me. So high school update, and then sort of a 9th grade update was the agenda for this particular meeting in October. We're going to go down to the lower grades. So there's 3 portions of the high school update. So first is, I'm happy to report that all of the extracurricular positions that were approved had been filled at this point in time, which of course was 13 days ago. That was quick math. Clubs and activities update. So administration had prepared 2 lists that they distributed, and when these notes will make it out in the packet, you'll see them. One was all the clubs and activities for the school year that are not going to be organized virtually, meaning that they're going to take place whether or not we're in school or out of school. And then the other was a list that will be led virtually. And then what was planned, and hopefully it has occurred, was on September the 10th, there was going to be a Zoom meeting for all the virtual club advisors to go through protocols with activities and organization and startup around these virtual clubs and activities to start in the last week of September. Obviously, there'll be questions at the end and compliments, if anyone would like to give me any compliments. There's a high school sports update. At that point in time, the high school sports schedule was still under construction, coming out in the next week or 2. There's my foreshadowing for you, Mickey McDaniel. If you're on this meeting, I'd like to ask you to kindly give us an update at the end of my report if you have any on that. A report was presented detailing that over the summer, there were 3,341 preseason workouts that had taken place. That's 3,341 temperatures that were taken through 9th grade football, high school football, field hockey, cross country, soccer, tennis, volleyball. It's an example of some of the additional effort that members of our staff have taken to make sure that these activities have taken place. Middle school sports, the update on that is this was the day that there was a meeting in the PAC, and our school system, along with Methacton and Upper Perk, were all in for all activities, with Pottsgrove all in for everything but football. That was on the middle school side. Again, Mickey, if you're listening, I feel like I'm talking to God. Mickey, sorry. There he is, out of the thin air. Hold on, just towards the end here, just give us an update on those schedule things. And it's good to see you, Mick, by the way. Quick music update. Mr. Jones was in attendance, provided an update on the marching band and the music activities that were happening. So, looking at when the performances are going to take place, that was up in the air. And as of September 1st, his program had taken 2,180 temperatures. Another example of extra effort to make things happen. They were using research from the University of Colorado about how to cover and use the instruments safely. And they're also implementing a strategy of using more kids to be involved with deciding things as just a way to keep morale going. A quick update on the 9th grade sports, looking at pulling up field hockey into the high school, junior, and varsity. Football at the point of the meeting, we weren't sure if 9th grade football was going to be taking place. Mickey, you can provide an update on that. Same thing for cheerleading. 2 more points to report here. We discussed the potential of additional live streaming of the events with RCTV. And we discussed some optimism back then around the good news that some state legislators were leading a new piece of legislation to provide control of the fall activities to local school systems. And the meeting was adjourned at 8:30, promptly 1 hour. Next meeting is scheduled at October the 6th, same place, and the Zoom information will be provided. So with that, I'm saying a lot. Got to go to one of those speaking clubs to get rid of that. But Mickey, do you have any updates on the schedules for both high school and middle school?
Sure, Mr. Schaefer. High school schedules are out. The only thing we're finalizing are the night games for hockey and the 2 soccers, but they are complete. Before the end of this week, coaches will have all their schedules for high school. 9th grade football is on. We have a schedule built so far with 5 games. We're trying to do 1 or 2 more. And the middle school schedules just came out. They finalized everything today. We received them in the email, and we're going to be posting them as well.
Thank you very much. And just I told my kids I would do this so that I could get made fun of. A shout out to you, Mickey. I would say I was going to use the term shout out because it's not age appropriate. But you're doing a heck of a job. I know you're putting a lot of, you always have, but sincerely, thank you on behalf of this community for all for all the work you're doing to work to see about getting as many activities planned as we can. So with that concludes my report. Any questions?
So I have a quick question. First off, your compliment, your haircut looks very nice. So I know you're looking for compliments.
Thank you. It's amazing what happens when you wash it once a week.
So in reference to when you talked about the bill that was being led by a group of legislators in Harrisburg about allowing school districts to, determine, fan participation in all extracurricular activities. As everyone knows, that bill was passed by the House and was passed by the Senate. And now it's back, well, not back, but it's actually in front of Governor Wolf, who has threatened to veto the bill. As of today, I haven't heard, but I don't believe any action was taken on that bill. If he does veto the bill, it's got to go back in front of the House for an override vote, I guess you would call it. I don't know if that's the right term, Mr. Fitzgerald, or not, but it's an override vote. So they would be voting on either to support the veto or override the veto. So as of right now, I know a lot of parents are anxiously awaiting, because I guess there was one school district recently as soon as they heard the news, start making announcements as far as what their fan participation was going to be like. So once again, we're kind of like, this is out there. It's been approved, quasi-approved, almost approved, however you want to say it. But until Governor Wolf either takes no action on, which I guess it's 10 days, it becomes a bill or a law. Or he could just approve it, accept it, or he could veto it. And that's what we have to wait and see what happens. I would make one recommendation. My recommendation is when we go to do this, because I'm pretty confident. I think something's got to be confident somewhere, so that I think that it's veto. Even if Governor Wolf vetoes it, it probably will carry. Hopefully it will carry. My recommendation to the board is that we don't start getting into all kind of fancy formulas and all kind of calculations and this and that. And we just keep it simple, especially for Ram Stadium, where we allocate 2 tickets per participant. And that's for home and away. So, and I think that if we do that, we'll definitely have the space to be able to accommodate that. And we won't get into all this back and forth where, well, one team has this many students, this team has that many students, and all this, and all that extra headaches that we're going to have to put on Mickey and staff or whoever's going to have to figure this out. So I would highly recommend that we just keep it simple and we just say every student participant gets 2 tickets. And that will scale basically on both outside events and inside events. It will scale based on the number of, because if you think about the size of our gymnasium and say for, I don't know what's going to happen in winter season, but when you look at basketball, how many, you're looking at, maybe 40 kids between the home and away, between 40 and 50 kids. So you're not talking about a lot of fans spread out throughout our gym. So that's my recommendation. Not that we're going to vote on it this evening, but I think that that's something that we should carry through with.
I also just want to remind everybody that this 2787, which is the Spectator bill, also includes the definition that teachers would be considered, teachers and support staff would be considered essential personnel. So that's an element that's been added in there, and it's very common where we'll see something that allows for, the athletics, but then also identifies teachers as essential personnel. So again, just so folks have the full picture on what this means and probably where some of the yay votes and nay votes are coming from.
So thank you for bringing, I didn't know that. So that's, so can we, given we're not meeting again until the 28th, and I'm not sure if, but can we get consensus, or is a motion needed just to allow administration to put forth a plan that's in compliance completely with, if the bill passes, so that they can begin preparing? Because we're on the clock as far as when activities start and things of that nature. For example,
When is the first game scheduled?
well, I know the first home high school football game is on the 25th, and it's against a school that has brown and orange colors.
So I have no problem making a motion. There is no compliance. I mean, the only thing is that you have to take what you're allowing, and it has to be updated within that plan. And you have to include, which is very similar to what we're already including, how will we deal with a positive test case within the fans? I mean, it's all spelled out. It's all, but I'll make a motion that, following compliance of the bill itself, we allocate two students per ticket. I make a motion that we allocate 2 tickets per student participant to be able to come and see, or watch the game, because it's extracurricular. It's just not sports. It's any type of extracurricular. So anything that we account for home, we don't have any say on away games. So this is only within our home stadium, within our complex. I make a motion that we allocate 2 tickets per student participant.
For clarification, Mr. DeBello, is that for all student participants, including band, cheerleading, or is it just for the athlete?
Absolutely for everyone. You know me better than that.
I think it's important to clarify, though.
I'm fine with that, but anybody knows me, it's for all students. And as I said early on, I would not support, band not being able to participate or cheerleading not to be able to participate because one is not any more important than the other.
So just further clarification too. My understanding when that bill was out, and this could have been withdrawn, was that the bill had passed the House, was going to the Senate, and in the meantime, Wolf's reaction to that was to put a statement out that it was a max of 250, including all players, marching band, cheerleaders, including all. So are we saying 2 tickets per student to that max, to that cap, or not?
This would override Wolf's.
Or is that still in play? Is that still in play, Mr. Fitzgerald?
No, what I believe Mr. DeBello is doing is essentially preparing for, if this were to become the law, that we would be able to hit the ground running if this were to either be overridden through a veto, he doesn't sign it, or he signs it, approving the bill. In looking at the language as we discuss here, generally speaking, I think what you would be doing, Mr. DeBello, is just saying this is one of the provisions you would want, notwithstanding the fact that then it would have to adhere with whatever our health and safety plan is for sports. But this would be inclusive of that.
Right, because in the bill, it spells out what you have to do within your health and safety plan to include, fans now within the stadium, I'll say stadium, but within whatever environment that the activity is being held. And as again, I want to, Colleen, going back to what you're asking, this bill would override Governor Wolf.
That's what I was asking. In fact,
So the approval tonight would be obviously subject to this becoming law.
So some thinking on that, Mr. DeBello. Because one of the things that I appreciate that, like being sort of parallel pathing, right? We're not just waiting for it and then waiting for us to meet again to give administration. But what about if it's 2 vouchers or whatever plan, if they were to come up with that's significantly more, but we just allow them to to make the plan and share it with us via email or something.
Again, I'm trying to help get the ball rolling.
Okay.
Because like you said, we're under clock.
Yep.
Which I don't think it's really going to change much, but if through some additional research because we constantly can update that health plan, right? So if there's in a few weeks or whatever it may be, that it says, hey, it actually could work out to 3 tickets as a participant, then we could update that. But I don't want to, what will happen is that we'll end up waiting and get this, and you know what I mean? So I'm just trying to, I know convinced 100% that 2 tickets per participant, we will have no problem whatsoever. I think the seating in our stadium is like 5,000 or 6,000 or something like that. So I don't see that being a roadblock for at least the short term. So that's what my motion is. And of course it would have to adhere to the bill as written.
Mr. DeBella, the only caveat I would have is that you might want to make your motion a minimum of 2 tickets, because I think we can get more students. I mean, I think we can get more fans in there than a minimum.
I'm fine with that.
2. Yeah.
I'm good with that minimum of 2 tickets. I just don't want to, it has whatever. So all right, if we're going to, thank you. And if we're going to amend it to a minimum of 2 tickets, then the tickets are given out equally to all participants.
I second that.
Any other questions or comments?
I had a quick question. Aside from that motion, as of now, are photographers for like the team portraits and Rampage and the yearbook allowed to go and take pictures during the games?
So I mean, absolutely, 100%. They're participating, and that's 100%, yes. And especially you want to take pictures of nice haired board members. I don't know where I'm going with that one, but yes.
Definitely will keep that in mind.
Madam President, can I hear the motion again as it's put forward? I'm a little confused.
I made a motion to allow a minimum of 2 tickets per participant to be given to all students, including all students that are involved in the activity. And tickets are distributed evenly amongst all students. So not one group of students can't get 4 and another group of students get 1.
What part of that though goes in line with?
Only in the event House Bill 2787 becomes law.
So
Contingent upon.
That statement will be part of that also then. Is that?
Thank you for the clarification.
Mr. Fitzgerald, is public comment required on this?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, now public comment. So anybody in the room? Okay, how about on Zoom, Rich or Bob?
I just lowered all hands. There were 3 waiting for public comment. If anyone in the Zoom room, 200 attendees, which to, all right, here we go. Hope Bodenshots. Hope, you may now make public comment on this issue. Please unmute yourself, first and last name, full address, and your comment on this issue, please.
Hi, my name is Hope Bodenschatz, 5 Dorothy Circle, Royersford. I just wanted to ask a question because I think there's something I understand, and I'm not sure if I'm misunderstood or if it's unknown, but I know that House Bill 2787 is out there and we're waiting for it to be approved or vetoed or whatever is going to happen. But on September 2nd, Wolf changed his guidance on spectators and he removed the ban on spectators and said that it's now normal gathering requirements. So 25 indoors, 250 outdoors, up to 50% of capacity. So even if the bill does not become law, we could still have up to 250 people present at an outdoor event. So I don't know if maybe the solicitor has commentary on that, or if someone can answer that, but it is my understanding that we should be able to still have some level of spectators at most events. I know football is the bigger issue with the number of kids there, but for the other sports that play in the stadium, it seems that there should be ample room under 250 for the students to be able to still receive tickets even if the bill does not pass.
Just to address your question, I think you're somewhat right, somewhat wrong. There is the limit, the 250, 25 person limit outdoor, indoor is applicable to athletics as it stands right now. The problem that has been, and it might not have been discussed at this meeting, but meetings are running together now, is football is a perfect example. When you take players, trainers, coaches, anybody, referees affiliated with it, you're essentially at about 240 of 250. So it doesn't leave any real wiggle room for any sort of fan participation. That resulted in this bill here, because then this bill said, okay, if you have a stadium of 5,000 and you could put maybe 20% capacity in there, that would alleviate the fan issue particular to football. Cross country, obviously, you probably won't have that issue, but with sports, the amount of participants it does get, you get to 250 pretty quickly, and that's the result.
Not with soccer. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was still there. Like a soccer event, at the absolute most, we're going to get 150 people. I think at a crowded soccer match, we top out with 150 if you include all the players and coaches and 2 parents each. So that's where I was just wondering about that. That's all.
The Olympic sports will be minimally impacted by this. This has been to address a sport that's a lot of people to make the sport work.
Well, I think the answer to her question is what Governor Wolf came out with after the bill passed the House is he came out and he adjusted, and he talked about the 250 again, and he talked about now allowing fans, because previously he wasn't allowing fans in the stadium. So then he came out and said, fine, I'll allow fans, but the 250 still is the mark. So events like even band competition or whatever it may be, because again, it's all extracurricular, it's not just sports. And his update to his mandate is now 250, which includes fans and participants. Prior to that, it did not include fans. He did not allow fans to participate. The bill came out and said that they were leaving it up to the school districts. We still have to follow, the CDC guidelines and all the other kind of stuff, which has to be written into the plan. But they're allowing school districts, and you have to use the 6 foot, I'm not really sure why they keep throwing that 6 foot in there, and wear masks. But that's the difference between what Governor Wolf said and what this bill. So the bill is actually going to will allow more fans, because you don't have to count participants when you're coming up with your numbers, if that's clear.
Mr. Schaefer, I can report in on that if you like.
Sure. Is that the Lord again?
Yeah. And just the 250 is a number that still includes all of the participants, game managers, work personnel, trainers, doctors, anything required to be able to run that game. They are included in that 250. The amount of spectators that are permitted are the 250 minus that number. The 250 is not spectators only. They are part of the 250 that when he put that in. That's why we feel House Bill 2787 really needs to be passed to relieve that. And Mrs. Bodenschatz is right. Based on soccer, field hockey, it can work. Football is a tough animal for that. When you look at teams that are 80, 90 personnel deep with players, coaches, trainers, managers, your officials, your game workers, it really reduces down the amount of people that we can put in for football. So I just wanted to bring that in. Thank you.
And keep in mind, it's currently the lesser of. So it's the lesser of 250 or 50%. It's not but it's not that the greater of. So at this point, we still couldn't fill the stadium. And I think Mr. DeBello, you said it was somewhere around 6,000 capacity. That would allow us 3,000, but unfortunately the 250 is still our ceiling.
Well, but I think just for one of the things that administration has done is that they went out and measured at least within Coach McNally Stadium, and the rough numbers, spacing it per the guidelines, and I wasn't there, is a total of about 800 could fit at 6 feet apart. Now, 800 is the 6 feet apart. There could be a couple or a family that could be within that 6 feet, right? So that could be up to 1,600. Again, just sort of throwing this out there.
But as of right now, the maximum is still 250, including all the players, the band.
We're hoping, right, absolutely. I think the motion that's on the table is for in the event that the bill passes, and it gives us the ability to do that. We just want to cut administration loose on the beginning plans of this. That's all.
If we know that number, then I'll up it to 4 tickets per participant. I'm just trying to, you know what I mean? All right. Okay.
Mr. DeBello, I think you're good at 2 in that case, because once you take into account
True.
the
You're
football
right.
team, the band,
Yep.
and the cheerleaders, you're close to 200 if each individual has 2 tickets.
Public comment? Is that
I
the
mean,
end of?
close to 400.
Are there any other hands raised for public comment?
There are no more hands raised at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other comment from the board? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. So administration, that's on you based on the outcome of that bill. Okay. All right, moving on. Anything else, Mr. Schaefer, for extracurricular? No. Okay, moving on to ad hoc, Tom?
The ad hoc committee had their first meeting September 10th. I didn't have time to type up the meeting minutes, so I'll do a recap. But the meeting itself, the agenda of the meeting is we kind of went over, we did the purpose of the ad hoc. We talked about the known obstacles and challenges that the administration's confronted with as of right now, looking at what it would take about bringing the students back to school. We then talked about some of the work that was being done by the committees. For example, the property committee had conversations. I'm not going to steal Mr. Jackson's report, but did have some conversations about, seating in the cafeterias. So we did talk about that. And then basically from there, we opened it up to, questions and conversations with the attendees. There were probably about 8 people attending in the room and about 300 people on the phone. Coming out of that, there's some really good conversation. There's some key points that I did try to write down. One was talking about ventilation systems for the building and what we can do if we're doing anything associated to that. We also, and I think we heard earlier the public comment, talking about a minimum checklist or a checklist of items to make sure that are covered when we go to open school. Communication is important to all the parents to understand exactly what we're doing when we go to open school. Project planning was a conversation, big topic of conversation about putting a plan in place, identifying key deliverables off of that plan and getting key individuals. And that's something that I'll circle back to. But within that project plan is that, it was suggested to make sure that we have a public health perspective. There was conversation brought up with the virtual that we're in now, and there's concerns about hours spent in front of a computer. There was conversation around social emotional situations as well. There was conversation, some clarity around what virtual and hybrid will look like, about having half kids in the building, half virtual. And, one of the thoughts was if there was, especially elementary school, if there's a teacher in front of the class and there was a large number of kids virtually, that we may want to consider having aides in the classroom as well. There was also a suggestion of only having virtual teachers only. There was, the conversation, which took up a little bit about, we're coming into the flu season and distinguishing between flu and COVID. And if we have to quarantine, are we quarantined for flu symptoms or just COVID symptoms, which would then, there was a participant on the phone that was very involved from an EMT and worked with the county for emergency management, and really talked about there was training available to that our nurses, or that we may, I don't know if we're looking into it or not, but there is training to really identify the differences when looking at or evaluating a student between colds, flu, precondition of COVID. So that was pretty interesting. There was questions and talk about cleaning that may or should occur between periods. And then there was somebody mentioned that a lot of our children live with grandparents, so we need, or they watch students after, the grandparents watch students after school. So we need to make sure we take that into consideration. Although I'm not sure, since we're responsible for the child from the time they got on the bus to the time they get off the bus. So I'm not sure what we could, other than properly educating or helping parents understand some at-home habits. Then we did talk about, well, before I get to that, there was, this one was actually a really good comment, putting together, going back to what I talked about earlier with the children living with grandparents, putting together parent responsibility checklist so that the parents truly understand what their responsibilities would be at home or with their children, or with sending their children to school, because there's always that concern that some parents knowingly or unknowingly will send kids to school. The parent may think it's a cold or whatever it may be, but that's something that we could look at. And then lastly, there was, questions about how we're going to deal with, and this is for virtual hands-on activities. We have like our production studio class or vocal ensemble, all these different things that, in the past, like vocal ensemble, they would just get together and practice, and prepare for their ensembles. And, so they were wondering, and I really didn't have an answer to that question. And that's something that we should be communicating, if we haven't already, to the parents as far as how those hands-on activities would be handled, not only virtually, but even if we brought the kids back to school. And then finally, there was, one of the ideas was that it'd be hard to continue to have meetings with parents of like the nature of 200 to 300 people. So we were trying to figure out a way how we could possibly pare that down. We're kind of limited again with the state requirements, which I struggle with when we sit in the cafeteria that could hold 800 people, and we're told that we could have 25 in here, and it just doesn't make sense. If you say 25% capacity or whatever, that's a different scenario. So the ad hoc committee, which is Clinton Jackson, myself, and Linda Fazzini, we have to get together and figure out how we could put together some type of advisory committee, I'll call it, to kind of pare down, and maybe they could have their avenues into a lot of the people that were on the phone and kind of work the communication channels that way. But we're kind of limited in how we would get a group of people together. But the core the core aspect of the team, no matter what, that Mr. Jackson and Ms. Fazzini and myself all agree on, is that if and how we pull this group together, we want to pull in and have people's opinions from as far as everyone's opinion, not just one particular group over another. So we'll be talking about how we'd be able to make that happen. And like I said, there was also suggested that we try to incorporate some type of health perspective or advice from health experts. But then again, the health experts today have their opinions. So what health expert do you include into the mix? But I did write the one name down of the woman that talks a lot about the training for nurses and identifying the differences between colds, flus, and preconditions, because she said that she went through a pretty intense training. So that's something that, you know, we could look at as well. Meeting went till, I want to say 10 o'clock. Yeah, we cut it off at 10 o'clock. We started at 7. We were going to originally go to 8:30, but with the amount of people that were on the call and a lot of good conversation, we just kind of ran it till 10 o'clock. That's the end of my report. And I'll try to, when I find a time, I'll try to type this up somehow.
I'd like to add a comment if I could. I thought it was a great meeting. One of the things that I've heard over and over again, and just from the public and at the meeting, was how communication has been one of our main obstacles. And I think it's really been just part and parcel of the pandemic. And the way that traditional boards work, slowly, they digest a lot of information. There's a lot of process to it. But I think the two main problems with this lack of communication have been this kind of culture of blame and criticism that has existed, and it's hindered the buy-in and support that we've needed, you know, the district, to quickly identify challenges and obstacles and evaluate our needs and address them. So I think the district needs to focus on improving its communication to meet the current situation in order to create an honest and transparent culture in which the staff and the administration can report all their obstacles to us quickly and effectively without fear of blame and criticism, which sort of makes them feel undermined and unsupported and not valued for a lot of hard work that they're doing endlessly and trying to constantly recreate this educational model. So I think we have to maybe, I don't know if it goes to a committee, possibly public relations. I'm not sure if curriculum, because that's where a lot of the changes are being made. Try to figure out some better systems of quickly communicating. I mean, we have a lot of traditional ways to communicate. There's the board memo, there's the agenda, there's the minutes. We have updates, but these ways have been on, you know, you have to wait 2 months for this to get approved before it's posted. They're very great ways of communicating for the old system, and I think they haven't been as effective when we've had to move so quickly. And I think if we can work on this, I think the public will have knowledge faster, which will make them feel less fearful, less angry, less emotional, and I think it will help the board members too have some time to not feel as though, I also think there's so much information coming the way of the board that it would just help. And I don't think this has to be total details and not all of it has to be fully fleshed out, but I'm thinking that's something that we need to work on. I have a couple ideas, but whether it's smaller, like faster weekly progress reports that we, you know, quickly push out to the community of things we're working on, more timely communication to the board so that they're not caught not knowing what we're voting on, that they know, I mean, maybe it's highlighting things that are more important that we're gonna vote on Monday, so they have to, when we get a memo that's hundreds of pages long, you know, to look at these pages first, because that's what we have to know by Monday. So I just think this is something that we need to work on, that I got a lot of input at the ad hoc that made me think about.
Easiest solution, meet every week. I mean, what we do isn't complicated.
But not everybody watches this every week, and the public, it doesn't want to sit through hours of meeting or read through the minutes. They need some more quicker information, I just think.
But I think if we're meeting every week, we are addressing items a lot quicker, and the meeting should not be 3 and 4 hours. It's just what we have to deal with should not take 3 and 4 hours. Hear me out.
Okay.
And as far as board members, that's an onus on them to go through to go through the information.
I definitely agree with that. I just think that meetings are a different thing than communication. I think one involves, but they're news.
But as far as, when I say meeting, if there's an issue that needs to be approval, something needs to be approved, that is something I think we should stress on the meetings. If you meet every week, as I mentioned earlier, if special education needs something, you need to tell us. I've said that for the last 2 months. Tell us what you need, tell us what you need. And I think if we meet every week, I'm a big proponent of meetings. I like to deal with the issue because I don't support emails. Emails can be read 10 different ways. But if I'm meeting with you, I can ask you a question, you can respond, and I can respond back to whatever question you may have. I mean, I think that's one way to do it as far as communication. I mean, as far as getting items that need to be approved. As far as communications, we're sort of limited being a conforming board, how we can do things.
I'm sorry, Mr. Jackson, in all fairness, I have heard you say on more than one occasion, when did you know this and why weren't we informed? When did you know this and why weren't we informed? So I think, I guess to an extent, I'm hearing that from Mrs. Fazzini's comments is it's the timely communication to the board as well, because part of the challenge is if we don't have the information until we're sitting at the board table, then it becomes this, wait, where did that come from? And everybody does get a little kind of taken back, and then it becomes a much more heated conversation. Whereas if we have that awareness prior, we can go through, we can understand where we are, and then we can have a conversation of, okay, now where do we go?
Maybe
Is more productive instead of reactive. It feels that a lot of our meetings have been reactive, and therefore we haven't been able to necessarily be as productive until the third hour.
Another suggestion would be, instead of waiting to the Friday memo, if something comes up on a Monday, get it out to the board on Monday, instead of waiting to get it out on Friday, and then we don't meet for another week.
Okay, just to piggyback on all of this, I will take this to community relations, this issue, and then whatever is discussed in there, I'll bring back here, and potentially it could then maybe go to policy that we set something up that we put in place about communication. And not only communication to the community, but communication with the board. And then regarding meetings, we moved the work session and flip-flopped the work session with those other committee meetings to continue to have a touch. I also feel though that we did that so we're meeting on the 2nd and 4th. And if there needs to be a motion on that second week, we've certainly adjusted those agendas throughout the summer. We're capable of doing that and of getting the input from Dr. Gooden if there is a change to the agenda for the meetings. So that being said, I think we've addressed that. I think to meet every week is unrealistic to the administration too, because I do feel like they need time to work on the directives that we give them. I think meeting every week is too much, but that is my, and I also feel like meeting every week, we're micromanaging, and that's not our goal here either. This is governance, not micromanagement. We're not in the weeds, they're in the trenches. We are not. That's just my position. I will take the communication piece, as I said, to community relations, back to the full board, and then potentially to policy if we're going to make some serious adjustments about communication and how that's shared and pushed out.
So, and I think we kind of just jump. Linda, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, by the way. And I think that we get trapped into these long meetings because there's always all this stuff on the agenda. Why can't we just have a meeting where we're coming in for a very specific reason? If we have to vote, or we have to communicate, if we have to review, or if we have to review, or whatever it may be, the communication outward to the parents, I think Erin, through a lot of the different channels that they've been doing between the RAM, whatever those video, huh? No, not your RAM chats, the Ramcast. that they were doing with, I mean, there's a lot of information going out. Facebook is she's constantly putting information out on the Facebook. I'll tell you that we could mask over it and call it communication, but the problem is that there's expectations of, and like Mr. Jackson said earlier regarding the special needs presentation that we went through, how it was broken down. This is what we're doing by this date. Here's this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. And this is what we're trying to get to as a board in a bigger picture within the district, because parents have questions and we're not able to answer some of those questions as of yet. So when you can't answer questions, it becomes a communication problem. And I believe, Mr. Jackson, that's what you're trying to head towards, is saying if we could systematically work our way through and saying, okay, this has to happen, then let's get in front of the board, let's move forward, let's get, review it, discuss it, vote on it, and move. And that's the difference. And if we're able to do that, and then we start to put up, very specific deliverable dates, this is going to happen by this date, this is going to happen by that date, this is going to happen. And we start hitting those things and we're communicating outward saying, okay, family, this is going to happen on September 23rd. And come September 23rd, there's a blast that goes out and say, okay, this is happening. This is where people feel, at least this is what I'm hearing, this is where they feel that there's a communication problem. And, we talk a lot about that we're going to do stuff, but and the other thing is that there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that, a lot of milestones that we are hitting that maybe that's where we're not doing a good job communicating outward.
That's what I feel like we need to work on.
The things that are,
because I personally, the parents I'm talking to aren't as so fixated with dates, but they're fixated with it being a void that they haven't heard about students with IEPs for several weeks. And so they get frantic. They don't necessarily need all the answers. They just need to know that we're working on it. And I just think that that's something that we probably have to do in a more, I think, efficient, speedy way than we've done in the past, just because we're in a different situation now. That's just my advice, or what I would be interested in seeing.
I agree with you. Okay, finance, we met September 8th at the high school conference room. We also did have set up virtually as well. We accepted the meeting minutes from May 12th. We then got into our monthly executive level reports. Now keep in mind, when I say monthly, this portion of the agenda is just focused on the 2021 school year. So far in the reports, it's just July and most of August, or through August 31st. So currently cash balances compared to last year, we're at 128 million. Compared to last year, we're at 112 million. Now, keep in mind, that sounds like a lot of money, which it is, don't get me wrong, but a lot of the taxes that just, we're in tax season basically for property taxes, and a lot of the taxes are coming in rather quickly. So that's a good thing, because this is the money that carries us through the entire school year. Real estate revenue is a little ahead par, and it's probably, again, due to the change in the marketplace. Our expenditures, our property services are down slightly because of our outsourcing of cleaning personnel. Again, we're only 2 months in, and we do have an impact of the school's not being used at this point. Our expenses are down in transportation as well. but they're not going to be down a lot because unfortunately, like every other school district that has a bus contract, you know, over the years, contracts were written that there's a minimum 180-day fee that school districts have to pay to busing contracts. And I would guarantee, no, I won't say guarantee, but I would suspect that in future contracts, there will be some type of pandemic clause written. But that is, that still is in place. So our transportation costs that are budgeted will still have to be paid out. There was questions about, did we reach out to the bus contract, to the bus company, talking about the contract and seeing if there will be drivers available when we do return back to school. And Mr. Fink indicated that he has met with Custer's, who is our bus company, on this topic, and is also in the talks about a renewal of contract for next year. Our assessments were basically at 4.092 billion. Our target for the end of last year was 4.092 billion. So we came in slightly under our target due to the stoppage in the fourth quarter, but we feel that we will surpass last year and come in and hit our target for the 2021 school year, which is basically 4.146 billion in assessments, which will be about $44 million increase in assessed values. The real estate transfer taxes are for July only, which slowed down from last year due to, of course, to the pandemic. I hate saying that already. But again, hopefully the real estate market's starting to pick up, and we'll start to see, you know, those transfer taxes get back in line. The earned income taxes, believe it or not, are ahead of last year by about $65,000. And reason being is when you look at our overall area of Spring-Ford School District, even though our county unemployment was running around 11% at one point, overall, the earned income taxes were still, and I think a lot of that has to do with some of the other companies in the area and the higher salaries that associate with those companies. Self-funded insurance is running about $160,000 a month, which is below anticipated. So we are also watching that as well. Then we got into the next part of the budget is what we call the soft close recap of the 1920 budget. The reason why we're calling it a soft close is because we're just entering the audit now, and we can't finalize all the numbers until the audit is complete. But from years past, we're always pretty accurate with where we end up pre-audit and post-audit. So we're feeling pretty comfortable with where we think we're going to end the year. The audit should start somewhere around October 5th, and will take roughly about a month. And I believe that they're going to try to do most of the audit virtually. So this is the exciting stuff. Revenue, there was a decline in interest and the collection of delinquent taxes in the fourth quarter due to the pandemic. So we're seeing about $800,000 less in revenue. We did receive all our basic education subsidies from the state. So our overall revenues exceeded the budget by approximately 1.1 million. Real estate transfer ended at 2.1 million compared to 2.2 million last year. The district was still over budget by about $458,000, but the shutdown impacted the end of year numbers. Our earned income tax, as I mentioned earlier, we still met our budget, and we, you know, we'll track and finalize our numbers there as well. Collectively, the year to date, the district saw revenues at 161 million and expenses at 163 million, which is an operational deficit of $2 million. Now, trying to explain this, if the board remembers, there's $4.6 million that worked into the 2019-2020 budget. That money has been, it comes out of reserves. It's been part of our planned strategy to keep taxes low. That money has been so much each year has been, is used, and we have it planned out to when we have the budget drop off. A large portion of that money is through a deficit fund that we had, not deficit fund, a debt services fund that we had in place over the years, and even monies that we, when we refinance bonds and that, there's monies that we ended up as a surplus at the end of the school year that went into these reserves, which then is used to plan out over time, which would help us keep our tax impacts lower. So with all that, without getting into all the numbers, right now we're looking at roughly about a $2.6 million operational surplus. And that monies will then be used, and a lot of it has to do with the shutdown in the third and fourth quarter of last year. I know, it comes up all the time about a tax rebate. If we ended up with a surplus, so I think if tax rebate, if we did that, that would give the taxpayer on average about an extra $30. But on the flip side, it's better to take that operational surplus, because over the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to have significant impacts to the budget related to the pandemic. As we know, when we were passing the budget this year, we knew that the impacts of the reductions that we made were going to be passed on to next year, that we have to make up. And that money will go towards making that up to level the tax impacts as far as covering the additional expenses next year. Because keep in mind, I talked about this during the budget, that our district expense-wise grows roughly at 3.5% per year, and our annual revenues basically grow 1% a year. So with that, we always start off the new budget season with a 2.5% deficit just out of the gates. So that money's that operational surplus that I'm talking about will help go towards that operational deficits when we start looking at future budgets. And that's why, we've been doing the 7-year budget, actually stretching it out to 10 years now, to really level out the tax implications as low as possible. So at some point towards the end of this year, we will be presented with, Mr. Fink will present a full report to the board with the finalized numbers and any surplus that is available. The school board will then have to vote on where to best store that money for future use. Okay, I lost my place, sorry. I'm trying to cover a lot and I'm just going as fast as I can. We also talked about the food services, since this food services is a self-sustaining business within the organization, within the school district. When I say self-sustaining business, I don't want to make it seem like we're running a for-profit organization, but food services, we kind of are, because we want to run food services at a surplus, because that money then helps, buy new equipment, additional equipment, or whatever it may be. And we basically saw about a $600,000 loss in food services this year. So part of that, and this is one of the things that we'll talk about later this year, one of the things that we may have to take and look at from that operational surplus that I talked about is moving some of that monies back into food services, so it will be able to function moving forward, because $600,000 is a huge hit to food services. On the flip side, we were tracking towards a $250,000 to $300,000 profit in food services if we would have stayed the course, which was the strengths associated to our agreement with Aramark. That was a lot to say in a mouthful. And then finally, the board got into COVID-related expenditures only for things that we as a board approved as we were getting ready to move into this year and, into, January of, the third and fourth quarter as well. If the board remembers, we approved somewhere around $1.93 million in unbudgeted expenses. And right now with some new grants, and all these grants are associated to the CARES Act, it's just some of the grants are being distributed by the state, some of the grant money is being distributed by the county, but it all ties back to the CARES Act that the federal government approved. And if everything happens the way we hope it happens, we're going to get about $1.2 million in grants, leaving us at a $700,000 unfunded deficit in those expenditures that we approved as a board. Hence, again, that operational surplus that I talked about, we would have to take $700,000 of that and move that into the funds to cover that deficit of $700,000. So between the deficit within what we spent this year, getting ready for virtual and everything else, and the $600,000 in food services, you're looking at $1.3 million that needs to be covered. So that's already half of that operational surplus that I talked about. Other than that, there was just one reassessment that occurred, and that the district's going to make out roughly another $28,000 in tax from that business. And then there was some board comment and some public comment, but that was pretty much the gist of the meeting. And I tried to go as fast as I could, but it was a lot of information. Any questions?
I caution the board, as I did in that meeting, that term surplus can be misconstrued. We have grants that have not come in and items that we paid for. If those grants, and I think you made reference to that, if those grants don't come in, there are subtraction that goes on there. We've got several months to the end of the year. We don't know what's going to happen. So I think that money should be just put in a little nice, safe place, and don't spend it until we get there.
Again, that's why it's a great point, Mr. Jackson. That's why I call it an operational surplus, because it was expenses that we did not spend because of being closed the third and fourth quarter. However, those changes that we have been talking about basically since we approved this budget, and all the changes that are currently happening and all the changes that could possibly happen, that's not a lot of money, and it could get consumed real quick.
Yeah, and
Actually,
there will be a lot more unbudgeted expenses, I'm sure, so.
And I caution, again, as Mr. Jackson said, I really caution the use of the phrase operational surplus. Operationally, we had a $2 million deficit. This is an accounting surplus. We were able to move monies from reserve accounts to offset that differential. It is not an operational, Mr. DeBello, you clearly said that we had a $2 million loss, that our revenue was at 1.61 million and our expenses were at 1.63 million. That is a $2 million operating loss. So I want to make sure that we don't have this false perception that Springford made money off of the closure of COVID and their pocketing. I just want to make that very clear. From an accounting perspective, it was an operational loss, and then monies from reserved were utilized as appropriate, but that doesn't mean that that's an operational surplus.
I'm sorry, and I don't want to get into a long-winded debate, but that's not accurate. And I was very clear and used my words wisely of what's going on. We had $4.6 million that was moved out of reserves to be part of this year's budget. I mean, the 19-20 school year budget. That money was not used. I mean, of that money, $2.3 million of that was not used. On the books, it's an operational surplus because that's like revenue coming in. It's not money that we're like, oh, we spent too much money, we got to go to reserves. That money was a planned $4.6 million to balance the budget. If it was a normal year and we did not experience the pandemic, that majority of that $4.6 million would have been spent as part of revenues used to balance the budget. We did not spend $2.6 million of that planned expenditure. So $2.6 million is now moved back into reserve which could be used for future expenditures. And I was very clear on the way I went through this, and believe me, I've spent numerous time talking with Mr. Fink about the best way to go through these numbers, because come November, when the audit's done, we're going to see a $2.6 million surplus that we have to move back to somewhere.
That I understand that, but I just want to differentiate the operational versus the non-operational.
Mr. DeBella, thank you for the information that you provided and for trying to do it quickly and in an organized manner. I appreciate that. Could you or Mr. Fink speak to the monies that should be coming our way regarding the food services? Over the past, during the pandemic, we were able to, like the other districts in the area, provide meals as needed. And there are, I think, state, but maybe federal money that comes to the districts to reimburse us for some of those costs. Do you have that, or Mr. Fink?
I don't know if Mr. Fink's on the phone, but I believe when he came up with the 600,000, I think he projected those potential injection of money as well from the federal, the state and federal government.
Yeah, if I may, Mr. DeBello, I am on the line. Yes, Dr. Wright, there is subsidies, if you will, from the USDA. They cover the community-wide food service program, which allows children in our community, regardless of whether they're students or not, 18 years or under, to have a meal for free or on the USDA, which gets reimbursed back to the school district. On average, I'm going to say those sales, if you will, tallied probably about $35,000 a month. So a much smaller amount than we would see in our normal operations. And really, those are kind of break-even amounts, considering the amount of staff that it still takes to make those meals and make them available for those students. And just so the board is aware too, I know we discussed this briefly at Finance, is the USDA on August 31st, or I should say that program was supposed to die or to end on August 31st. However, they made two moves. The first move was to make that plan or that program continue through the end of October or until the date that school starts. However, on August 31st, they extended it through December 31st of this year. So we'll be able to continue that program for our community, our entire community, till to the end of this calendar year.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Finance?
I do have a question briefly. So from what I understand, washing away a lot, essentially the net impact for COVID-related expenses, when you, again, wash out sort of the grants that are coming in, is a bogey that we had to digest of around 700K, give or take, net so far. So I'm just Mike here, and I'm sorry I missed the meeting, said with huge amounts of sarcasm. Has there been any sort of directive to administration to try to seek, can we creatively find any savings non-operationally or just creative thinking about anything? Were they tasked with trying to find that so we don't have that?
Well, that's a whole other conversation that's beyond finance. That would have to be a board directive that would have to tell administration to go and find $700,000. Remember, that's in the 2021 school budget. So that's not for finance to sit there. I will say that that when we had that meeting, that Jim Mr. Fink and I don't know if it was Chief Boyer or whoever, but they did find there were two more available grants that we applied for that became additional CARES money. So originally, there was two large ones that we were going after, and then we were able to add two more, which helped reduce reduce that down to, $700,000. But I mean, that's a valid point, and maybe that's for a future meeting for us to sit there, and have that conversation as a board with the administration and say, where could we find $700,000? But keep in mind, we're not out of the woods. We're still, we tried to predict in this budget loss of revenues related to, interest rates and different things as we do the 2021 school budget. So we still may see, other impacts to the school overall expenditures over the next couple months. There may be additional things that we're going to agree as a board to go out and purchase. As Mr. Jackson said earlier, tell us what you need if we need to. And I think you even mentioned about, bringing in additional staff. So these are all the conversations that we should have. But again, I just want to reiterate, that wouldn't be something the finance would direct the administration to do.
Okay, and with that, thank you, Mr. DeBello, and we're going to move over to Mr. Jackson for an update on the property committee meeting.
Thank you, Madam President. Meeting was held on September 8th. Meeting minutes were accepted from May 12th. Some of the bigger items of discussion was closeout of the high school addition project. We're very close to finalizing all the items and the final payment. There was an update for year 2021 capital project updates. I'm a strong advocate for reinvesting in our facilities, so this always makes me very happy to report this. The Limerick fire alarm replacement was completed. The Brook Elementary classroom unit ventilator replacement was completed. The 9th grade phase 2 window replacement was completed. The 9th grade phase 1 parking lot repaving was completed. The Royersford Elementary driveway and parking lot was completed. The Spring City replacement of classroom carpet with VCT was completed. And the 8th grade room 120 floor demo and replacement was completed. From there, we went into new business operations. Some discussions there were operational challenges for all the students to be back in the school. Some discussion points were face covering requirements. We reviewed the student capacity for the largest lunch period for every school and additional space needed to socially distance while eating. There were some blueprint drawings that were presented to the public to discuss how cafeteria tables don't allow the 6-foot distancing and individual seatings would be needed. There will be a follow-up meeting, an update at the next property meeting. There was discussion of the loss of the gymnasium space in all but 2 schools. Another big item was the project planning for all students to be back in school. There were discussions with the administration to hire an outside consultant to provide project management services to produce a project schedule document. This document would outline all required tasks, target dates, milestones required to bring the kids back in school at the start of the 2nd quarter. That will become a board item for approval. There was discussions with Chief Boyer regarding school police and emergency management. Some of the items some of the services that they're providing is controlling our laptop deployments, deliveries, assisting the nurses with the health annex setup. Chief Boyer is delivering all PPE requests for special needs September 14th, which is today. Chief Boyer is meeting with finance this week to rectify all PPE purchases to date and future purchases within the PCCD grant of 2020 for COVID-19. Actionable items would be the board approval of a project manager for consulting hours to assist and provide some oversight for the development of the plan to return the kids back to school. And for the next meeting, there will be a continued work on the cafeteria seating solutions to provide an update at the next meeting. And that's my report, Madam President.
How open is ICS to the project management piece? How open is ICS to the project management piece? Are they agreeable? Have there been discussions? Would they be agreeable to taking that on?
Yes, they provided us a proposal, I want to say Friday of last week, and that will come before the board at the next meeting.
Or in number 8, when we discuss project management, I'm sure we'll have maybe more details then. Also, thank you very much to Mr. Hunter for providing us with those detailed ideas of how potentially beginning the planning process of how we could make that cafeteria work, right, for the 6 feet apart. Other than the plan that was presented during that meeting, were there other options that were considered that maybe he let go of, and then this was the one that he was proposing, or is he bringing more back to the next property committee?
There is, we looked at many different options, and we actually spent an hour today going brainstorming. So we got a couple ideas, but we're gonna make this work. That I guarantee, we're gonna make it work.
All right, thank you. Oops, any other questions for property for Mr. Jackson? Comments? Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Jackson. And Mr. Rizzo, Assistant Superintendent's report.
Thank you. Good evening, directors, students, staff, and community members. Last Tuesday, September 8th, was our first student day, and while virtual, our teachers and students were happy to be together for another exciting yet very different experience this year. Dr. Gooden and I, along with our entire leadership team, wish to thank the staff for all of their work in getting ready for this school year. Our teachers took heroic efforts to help our students feel welcome and connected, even in this virtual environment. Today, as Mr. Krakauer mentioned, was our first in-person day for some of our students in our low incidence classrooms. As Mr. Krakauer mentioned, and he did a very eloquent job of this, it was wonderful to see students and staff reunited and excited to be together. And we were learning that we can see smiles with masks on by looking at eyes, and there was a lot of that going on. Social emotional learning. Our building leaders led the social emotional learning charge by engaging their staff in an activity of their choosing. Additionally, they empowered their staff to implement activities chosen from a menu of options. The SEL task force has developed a website of resources, worked on consistent language and implementation throughout the district, begun developing opportunities for wellness days, and engaging their students in personal and meaningful ways during this first week of school. The SEL task force will be back in the swing of things in the next few weeks, where they will continue this work. Thanks to all the hard work of the SEL task force that volunteered their time throughout the summer to build these resources and opportunities. Back to school nights, just an update on that. After a lot of deliberation and discussion, the administration did decide to postpone back to school nights until we bring all of our students back into the building. So stay tuned for that. Your building administrators will share information about updated back to school nights and parent-teacher conferences that are really just going to be right around the corner. I want to share a few statistics with you. There's a lot of surveys that are out there. A quick enrollment update. Based on from last September 2019 to September 2020, at the elementary level, yields a loss of 107 students. We had 2019, 2,915. This year we have 2,808. At the intermediate school, middle school level, grades 5 through 8, 2019, we had 2,595 students. In 2020, this year, we have 2,483, yield of a loss of 112. And at the high school level, grades 9 through 12 in September of 19, 2549, and this year, 2020, we had 2,577, or a gain of 28. So district-wide enrollment is down approximately 191. There's several reasons for this. Obviously, the pandemic is a big one. I also know that that the registrar is feverishly getting people enrolled as well. So we're going to see those numbers climb. A lot of fluctuation going on right now. Excuse me. Spring Forward Cyber Learning. We currently have 484 students enrolled, grades K through 12. There were additionally 356 students that enrolled and changed their mind in some capacity. So we've processed over 800 enrollments in some capacity, and a lot of the changes largely due to learning what the district was going to be doing. At one point, we weren't sure what virtual was going to look like. So things change as time went on. Elementary, K to 4, we have 224 students. At the intermediate level, we have 147 students. That's grades 5 through 8. And then at the high school level, we have 113 students. On Friday, the district sent out a return to school family survey. As of 6:10 p.m. today, and as I was looking at the results, as I was doing it, numbers came up, I had to stop at 6:10. After the survey being sent out this past Friday, here are the rough numbers, based on about 7,900 students. It's important to note that the average building participation is 7.7%. So 7.7% is all buildings equal in 100%. The data came back a range of 5.4% participation for kindergarten and at the highest 8.5% for seventh graders. And what that basically means is our sample size of 5,115 respondents is fairly representative of our actual population and not necessarily skewed to a particular grade. And again, these are pretty rough numbers. Having said that, we do want to say thank you to our parents, because over the weekend, we had 5,115 respondents over 3 days. That's pretty amazing. So thank you. That's, that response rate is about 65%. And given that that came in 3 days, that's pretty incredible. Total surveys sent out, 7,900. Total respondents so far, well, I guess I update the numbers, 5,126. Like I said, as time went on, it kept adding. So 5,126. Of that 5,126, 73.3% indicated they want to return to in-person learning, which is 3,758 students. Of that 5,126, 1,368 indicated that they wanted to do either virtual or cyber learning. Breaking that down, 22.4% of that 5,000 plus indicated they would like virtual learning, which is 1,149 students, and then a return to cyber learning for 219 students at a 4.3% of that. So breaking down that 5,126, 3,758 are interested in returning to in-person learning, 1,149 returning to a virtual environment, and then 219 the spring forward cyber learning. So again, rough numbers, if you're going to apply that formula to each grade level of 620 students, which is about our average per grade, we can project about 454 of each grade would return to the classroom, in-person classroom, 139 roughly would choose virtual, and 27 would consider going to spring forward cyber learning per grade. So that's how you would apply that formula.
Now, before Mr. Rizzo goes on and moves past that, I am looking at the survey right now, which is live, and we've got 5,498 responses. I'd like to thank the parents in the community for taking the time to complete this survey, because in the last 2 months, we've had some unanswered questions, and this survey has allowed us to identify with a little bit more accuracy than we had the number of students who are actually interested in staying or remaining virtual. Now, I will say this in the community, that we are looking for a virtual option here. We are looking to provide an opportunity for parents to send their children back to school or to remain virtual. Now, we're still fleshing that out, but it's got to happen. And so this survey is giving me exactly the information that I need. I know who the students are. I know what grade they're in. I know what building they're in. And what we will do is we'll follow back with those families, make sure that they're committed to the virtual option. We are fleshing that out currently. The virtual option is probably going to look different at the elementary level than it does at the secondary level. And so I just want to thank the parents that are responding and completing the survey, because it's given me the data that I need and my administrative team needs to move us forward, because we are looking at a November 12th. As long as our metrics in the county remain where they're at right now, we're moderate. We've been at moderate. And as long as we can keep those and stay within that moderate to low range, we are indeed planning on opening school. Now, just before I turn it back over to Mr. Rizzo, I just want to make sure that the parents know that I appreciate them giving us that information, because we needed to know that. And it is informative and instructive for us to help us plan. Secondly, a resident had mentioned this morning about, or this afternoon or this evening about documentation of procedures when kids come back to school. Remember, this summer, a lot of our work that we did was in the form of 3 templates that have kind of been discounted, but they are bulk of what we do. So if you look at the website, there is a tab over there that says About Spring Forward. It's on the far right-hand or left-hand side of the website. It says About Spring Forward. If you click on that and go all the way to the bottom, it says Reopening Plan. Click on that reopening plan. you will see another site that says phase reopening plans, and those are the ones that we submitted to PDE. If you click on that, it will give you cleaning, sanitizing, disinfecting, and ventilation. It will give you social distancing and other safety protocols. It will give you monitoring student staff safety, and then finally other considerations for students and staff. So I want to just direct the community's attention to that tab, because there have been some questions about what are we doing, or what have we done, or how are we preparing for the kids to eventually come back to school. Well, that information is in there. But if you'll take a look at that under the reopening, under About Spring Forward reopening plan, you'll be able to see that. As well as if you move around in there a little bit, it will give you other information such as our continuing education plan, which is our curriculum instruction department has spent a lot of time putting that plan together to facilitate or to address 3 stages of opening that we had proposed. So in question to that, as far as the document with the procedures for coming back, it's there. Sometimes, you know, it seems like July is a lifetime ago, but it did, that document did encompass a lot of our work this summer. And so if you want to take a look at that, it's pretty informative as to what we're doing to make sure that our students and our staff, when they return, are safe. And in addition to the PPE that we've had many discussions about, et cetera, et cetera. But you'll see that laid out in that document. Mr. Rizzo, I'm sorry I hijacked your report.
That's okay, thanks. That's actually the end of the report. But I did want to speak, you started out by saying unanswered questions. I just want to throw out that there was an unanswered question at the special education report that I did want to answer. And Mr. Schaefer or nice haircut guy, or whatever you want to say, keep going, right? He asked the question, would it cause indigestion if we had an earlier start? And I would say that the answer is, short answer is yes. So we started, and when I say we, the special education supervisors and I started by throwing a bunch of dates on a wall. We did that multiple weeks ago. Dr. Gooden, in one of his reports, said that low incidence classrooms are going to open up September 14th, and then every 2 weeks after that, we were going to be bringing groups back. And that's what the 2 weeks was that Mr. Krakauer alluded to. When we looked at that and we threw it all on the wall and we saw what looked like September 28th was the 2-week mark, and that was a non-student day. So then we looked at the 29th and we thought, well, that's not necessarily the most appropriate to have a group of students come back for 1 day after a 3-day weekend and then go home on Wednesday for a virtual instruction day. So we thought, let's look at October 1st. So October 1st kind of became our semi-hard stake in the sand, so to speak. Then we threw it out to our team and we started saying, what does this look like? We talked to transportation, we talked to technology, we talked to personnel, we talked to our building level leaders and said, what does October 1st look like? And we had a few very in-depth meetings to talk about what that might look like. And there are really kind of 4 huge things that get in our way, all of which are related to time. Transportation, we can set it up, and Ms. Sanderson does a tremendous job of getting transportation in place, but it takes time. Once we know what students are going to be coming back to the building, it takes time to get that transportation set up, and that's not something we can get wrong. We have to nail that. Personnel, whenever we do ask, and we do have a pretty good idea of what our personnel hope to do, but once that is determined, then we've got a plan for what the impact is going to be, which could be shifting people around, it could be assigning, recruiting, getting subs, and that takes time because right now everybody's fighting for the same subs. And I will say that Mrs. Lease is doing a tremendous job of being an advocate and getting our subs in place as soon as possible so that we can have as many in the building as possible. Physical space, we tasked our principals with what does it look like when we have, starting with our low incidents, then going with our supplemental instruction, then going with our itinerant. And they, again, that indigestion thing came up because there were some things that needed to be in place to make sure they had a space for everybody so that they can go where they need to go and it be educationally sound. And lastly, it takes time. Getting results takes time. We sent out at the beginning of August, we sent out results, or we sent out a survey to get results to find out who would come back. But the targets have changed, information has changed, requirements have changed. So we want to get updated information. So tomorrow, first thing in the morning, we're sending out a student survey, and then we're going to give that a 3-day turnaround so we have actionable information that we could use moving forward. With that in place, we can then move those other things around. Speaking of what other districts are doing, the 4 special education supervisors meet regularly with other special ed supervisors from other districts in Montgomery County through MCIU. And we want to make sure that our plans are at least in alignment with what others are doing. A lot are doing nothing, a lot are evaluating in October. There are a few that are putting some services in place. Very few are doing anything with other than complex needs or low incidence classrooms. So in many cases, we're ahead of the game in terms of our planning, and others we're kind of in alignment with. So I want to say thank you to our whole administrative team and our special education supervisors for really vetting this out, because we started with a date and we ended up having to move it because some other things would get in the way. And when it comes to accounting for all of our children coming into the building, we can't get that wrong. We have to nail that, and it takes time to make sure that we do that. So I hope that's kind of a not as long-winded answer to your question, Mr. Schaefer. And thank you.
I have a, okay, can we ask questions?
I was going to ask if anyone had a question.
Oh. I have 2 questions. One is, this is probably a simple one. So last Wednesday, which was, and again, I take everything with a grain of salt because it was the first week of school and a lot of people are anxious. There's a lot of things that are going on. And I will start off with commending the administration, teachers, everyone involved in getting us started the first week of school. And what I try to tell parents that I heard from, that what they normally don't hear is every year, even in normal years, the first week of school has a lot of bumps and obstacles that get by. It's just that you don't hear it or see it on the levels that we see it this year because, of being virtual. And I think that we made tremendous headway to get where we are, so far. But the one thing I wanted to bring up was, it seemed like on Wednesday, which is supposed to be I don't know what the actual name of Wednesday is supposed to be.
Technically,
Yeah.
it's the synchronous instruction day.
Synchronous or
Yeah.
asynchronous?
Synchronous. And that's where, if you look in the instructional continuation plan, there's 3 definitions that people need to make sure they're paying attention to. Live instruction is on Zoom with a teacher. Synchronous instruction is on your device at a particular time. Asynchronous is working at your own pace at a different time. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday are technically synchronous live instruction days. Wednesday is a synchronous non-live instruction day. However, our teachers have been working, as they've been going through Canvas, are doing both synchronous and asynchronous in their classroom settings. But yes, last Wednesday.
Okay, so then obviously there's a lot of confusion about what that Wednesday is, because I believe parents thought that Wednesday was the day for their students to just work at their own pace. And I guess there were students that are required to still log in following a specific schedule for that day, bell schedule. I took it as I guess I was confused myself. But I did say, I can't answer that question, so I'm going to bring it up at the meeting.
Sure, that's a great point. And one of the things that I think this board really wanted to stress was empowering the teachers through this bell schedule to make choices that most benefited their students and advancing their learning. So that last week was the first week obviously for our students, but it was also the first week for establishing routines, for establishing procedures, for working on social emotional learning elements, for feeling that connectedness. So I'm not sure what teachers did what during that time, but I know this board really supported the teachers having the autonomy to make some of those decisions while we went through that live instruction. So yeah, some teachers did different things on that Wednesday. Could we have been maybe a little bit more clear? Probably. I think it's confusing for a lot of people. I'm still explaining to parents what cyber versus virtual means. So we're working through it together. The vernacular always gets in the way in education.
So then it's definitely something that we need to communicate. Thank you. But we need to communicate out to the parents, because that seemed to be the common thing that I kept hearing from parents, that there was confusion around. I was hearing, wait, are we supposed to log in tomorrow? Wait, what are we doing Wednesday? Oh, wait, we're not supposed to. So that just seemed to be a disconnect. I think all the other issues that I heard last week I think there were technology stumbling blocks and everything else, which is all to be expected. So I'm not going to, and I kept telling parents that, yes, it's the first week. We tried to make a lot of advancements since the fourth quarter of last year, and it's just going to take a couple days for it all to iron out. You know, if we're still having issues 3 weeks from now, then I can understand being upset. But the first week of school, everybody needs to we're working towards a goal of providing the best educational environment possible, you know, through virtual options at this point.
I do think that Tom's absolutely right. There needs to be still a clarification from the district. Do they follow the bell schedule or not on Wednesdays? Because that is still a misnomer out there, or a misconception. It's, you know, this teacher says, yes, we have to log in. This one says that we don't. This principal says that we do. This one says that we don't. And I think for consistency, it's got to be one way or the other. Either they log in or they don't. That doesn't necessarily mean that the teacher is going to be in there. It's the synchronous, but not necessarily live instruction. So, but I think the check-in piece, that still is not super clear to families.
Okay, noted. And I would also say that it was the second day of school. So, I mean, so we are definitely, and we're, you know, our first day of school was a live day. The second day was an asynchronous, a synchronous, no teacher, a some teacher kind of a day. So absolutely, we're working through things. But again, I have to go back to our teachers, and I'll go ahead and say it real quick since I have the mic. Don't turn me off, please. So, yeah, right. One of the things that we take, here we go. One of the things that we take for granted in education is when students get on the bus and they come to the building, they are funneled to where they need to go. And then as soon as they get into that space, they then get what they need for the rest of the day. Our efforts were focused on getting them into that space. And that was a challenge whenever we had Canvas and we had Google Classroom last year, and we were meeting in Zoom. So we had 8,000 students that were figuring out, and families that were figuring out, okay, where do I go on that first day of school during period one? So there was a big communication from Mrs. Crew on, you know, what does it look like from the building principal? What does it look like from the teacher? How to get where they need to get. So yeah, our efforts were focused on day one, and day two was, you know, whether it was intended or unintended to be a little bit very, you know, but yes, absolutely, we'll look at it.
And again, nobody's disputing, everybody, that's why I started off when I take everything, and I commend everyone for all the hard work. It was just, a lot of the other things that I heard were like, this is the first week of school. But the one common thing that I want, and again, I was confused myself as far as trying to understand the schedule. So it's just something that became a theme of, what is Wednesday supposed to be? That's all. So that's just something we need to clear up.
I appreciate the input. Thanks.
And I think we can do that. I will say that when I meet with the administrative team on this, though, we will need to make sure that we are documenting attendance for that Wednesday. So no matter how it turns out, or how, you know, how it's explained, one thing that we need for that Wednesday is our attendance counts.
So is this something we can address before next week's Wednesday?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna give them a break.
Okay, Mark.
So my other question real quick then is that, and you're right, we have these 3 plans that we sent out to PDE, and, you know, things changed from the time that we sent those plans as well. So it's really taking a lot of that information within those templates that we sent, and maybe bringing in more of a cohesive document, operational document out, because a lot of it's just carried from, depending on what we do and how we bring students back to school. But I'm just curious, because I asked this question back, and I threw the suggestion out back in late July, early August, as far as if we were doing an opening strategy, and within that opening strategy, we would focus on, you know, elementary school. And if we wanted to bring elementary school back first, K through 4th grade, and what I talked about is they're basically on their own buses, they're in their own buildings, they're in their own rooms, and other than working through the cafeteria lunch portion of the day, from administration standpoint, what would it take for us to be able to do that, and how long would it take, would we think?
Sure. Property has addressed the cafeteria layout for every school.
Okay.
And maybe if that's not a question you can answer right now, maybe that's something you can work on. I'm a big fan of this phased-in approach. I love that.
We don't know, or
Well,
do we have an idea, or?
we do now. One of the nice things, as I just mentioned, we need to know who is interested in being virtual. That's something that we needed. So we needed to know that from the teachers, we needed that information, and we needed the data on who is interested in a virtual option. And so we're getting that as we speak. And so to your point, my goal is to get our students in as fast as we can.
So now that we have those pieces of information, we can
That's
start
very
to
important
pull
to
it
me.
together.
It was highly important that we get this data.
So we meet in 2 weeks, and is it the direction of the board then to give some?
All I'm trying to do is, I'm just trying to get some information. So if we know that 70% of the students would come back, potentially come back, because I think let's just say we're going to open elementary schools August 8th. October 8th. I'm just throwing a date. I'm not, right? We would have to survey the parents again, because we'd have to provide additional information saying, okay, this is what we know. We're bringing the kids back this day. This is what the school is going to look like. This is going to be the safety precautions that we're going to put. And we have a lot of this information already. These are the things that are going to occur when the student comes into the building. These are the, and then maybe we could, and that parent checklist that I talked about from the ad hoc, we have a lot of that information that we could give to the parents and say, this is a checklist that you should follow. And as you're preparing to send your child to school every day. I mean, so all I'm trying to get to is, and I said this earlier in the meeting, that we have a ton of information that's been put in a lot of different spots. And I'm just trying to get to the point of, because look, I'm sorry, but I start talking about this in July, then I pushed in August. We're in the second week of September. We already know that the trials and tribulations that we're going through, we're trying to bring the special needs students, all that back into some of the challenges that you guys are working through and the timeline that takes. So I'm concerned about, if we don't start talking about this now, we're going to stretch into January, February. I mean, so I'm just trying to get to a point where saying, okay, and I've been talking about this phased approach for a while, and say, if we start here, what would that look like? And what do we need to do, what will we need to put in place to achieve that? How can we be successful? Again, the numbers in the county are changing, rapidly changing to the better. I encourage the board, if they don't, to go out to the county website, because there is so much information that the county puts out. Every day they're updating the charts, the graphs. The positive cases in the last 7 days are down 65 or 68 from the previous week. So, and they show you the graph, they show you the curve, they show you how flat it's been. So there's so much information, and I'm just trying to get to the point where, we have, and I don't want this to be viewed as I'm using elementary school kids as an experiment. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just trying to understand, because that's a good focal point for us to look at, because like I said, they're in their own rooms, pretty much on their own buses, they're in their own schools, and they really don't leave their rooms to go to different classes throughout the day, or that movement is very minimal.
Well, I agree there, it's easier to social distance, but also K to 2 and especially and K to 4, it's tougher for them to learn virtually.
Absolutely. It's extremely hard for them.
Amen.
I'm not
Amen,
gonna,
yeah.
I definitely want, I totally agree with that. So anyway, I'm just trying to get to something here.
I thought we had discussed this before, and they have the deadline of November 12th. I think we had gone through all of this, and the information from the survey was going to provide the administrators with the information they need to come up with a plan that we are phasing in our special ed students now, and then the next step would be to look at what other groups we could phase in.
Perfect
Yeah,
transition.
I think we talked about 504 and then we talked about K through or elementary.
So could we just, again, sort of forward leaning, could we look at bringing some degree of elementary?
So what I'm hearing is that is the direction.
Yeah, I'm very sensitive. By like, is October 5th crazy talk? Is October 12th crazy talk? Okay, we're getting that. Well, then let's do all that we can, right? To see how we can logistically prepare to bring students back. And I think that's what I'm seeing from the surveys. That's what I'm hearing. So let's celebrate and get to work and get ready.
Go ahead. I was just going to add, the other thing is, where we were talking about, and I think to tag on, where we were talking about the PD plans and so forth, those are kind of our policies, right? Everybody's going to wear a mask. Okay. But the way in which that's going to be operationalized in each building is going to be a little bit different in terms of where we have our health suite or additional support. So those now we need to take those policies and operationalize them, and each building is going to need to develop those operational plans that can then be shared with the community. And so I think that's a key, because until we have those operational plans, the hows, not just the what's, but the hows, we're not going to be able to take that step forward. So I think the first thing is, how long will it take for the administrators in each of the buildings to really develop those how plans? And I understand that to some extent, some of that has begun already, especially because they are hosting some students at this point. But really, when they become, fully, kind of full utilization, full occupancy, what's that going to look like? So how long will it take for that team to bring that back and to have that ready? Because that would also be, I think, a key component for our ability to move forward.
Okay, so then I would ask, it is then the full direction of the board to ask administration or to give the directive to administration to look at bringing back the elementary school students sooner rather than later. Getting us some dates, bringing that information back to us on our next meeting. Okay? Okay.
But Madam President, what do you mean by sooner or later? I mean, we get.
Certainly, I don't want to wait till the October meeting. That's exactly what I mean by sooner rather than later. Okay, anything else, Mr. Rizzo?
No, I would just say that we'll have a fairly formed plan to you in 2 weeks, right? I mean, that's what you want, we'll have it.
Yes, yes, we would like that, yes.
Yeah.
With reasonable timelines.
You got it, we'll follow the same process, backwards mapping. We'll start with where our goals are gonna be, work backwards, find the barriers, just like we did for special education plan. Yep. And we already have kind of started that process, so.
Okay, so then moving on, I'd like to.
Madam President, so this is going to be presented in detail, all in 2 weeks. I'm just asking the question because
I know
what I'm hearing, it's not going to happen.
Well, in 2 weeks, we should be able to give you a framework and a very good date of what we're looking for. You're asking me right here at the table. I mean, I'm just giving the best I can do.
Thank you.
Right, Dr. Goodman, I would rather you say, school board, no, I can't do that within 2 weeks, rather than come up with a framework of a lot of nothing.
I go back to my original question. It seems this is what happens, and we kind of veer off my original question. My original question is, do we know what it would take and how long it would take for us to be able to bring elementary school kids K through 4 back?
I
No,
think,
I'm asking
no,
Dr.
no, no,
Gooden.
no. I have a question though. In another breath, a short time ago, you're talking about hiring a project manager, and then you're saying to Gooden, well, tell us what the answer to this is. And he's saying he'll have a framework for us. We're totally bypassing the project manager piece. If we want to do that, then fine. But I feel like we're going around in a circle here. What are we asking for them to do? Are we asking for them to create a plan? Are we asking for a framework? Are we asking for a project manager? What is the full board asking the administration to do?
Well, I'll speak for Clinton L. Jackson, okay? Mr. DeBella had one comment, and Mr. Rizzo gave a response. Everything else is just add-on. This has nothing to do with the project manager. My point to Dr. Gooden is don't box yourself in a corner. If you don't think 2 weeks, don't get pressured to be in a corner to come up with something in 2 weeks if you don't feel comfortable with it.
Do you or do you not feel comfortable with it for 2 weeks, Dr. Gooden?
We're talking about K through 4. A plan for elementary.
Dr. Gooden, before you answer the question.
Yes, we can do it.
Okay, well, before you answer the question, do you understand what I'm asking?
Yes.
Let's start there.
Yes.
Because
I got you.
Thank you, because we kind of went off, and I think Mr. Schaefer, Mr. Mr. Jackson is tracking what I'm going towards, right? Again, I'm going to reiterate. All I'm asking is, do we know what we need to do, when we need to do it, how long it will take to do it, to bring the elementary school kids back? And then what Mr. Schaefer added on to that and said, could you present that in 2 weeks? That's the question.
I got it.
Yes.
So that, okay. And
And
you'll have the detail, not a template or framework.
correct.
You'll have the detail necessary to depict everything that needs to occur
Yes.
in 2 weeks.
Yes.
Great.
And
That's
the
all
reason I will qualify by saying the reason I'm able to answer that question in affirmative is because of this survey data that I'm getting.
And
And so I want to urge everybody out there, please complete the survey.
And that coupled with a lot of the information that you gathered so far there's so much, and that's why I said earlier, there's a ton of information that we got to pull together.
Any other comment?
Could you do it next week? No.
No.
Mr. Fitzgerald, do you have a solicitor's report for us this evening?
I have no report this evening.
I have one quick question for you, Mr. Fitzgerald. Did you ever teach history?
Apparently in Mr. Krakauer's world, I apparently did. Yeah. Very good.
Okay, moving on through the agenda, minutes, any questions or comments? Okay, personnel, A through H, questions or comments? Finance, A through E, questions or comments? A through E on finance?
No, I was saying H, Madam President, under
Personnel?
Item 5.
Where are you? I'm in finance.
You went one too fast. Why is this on the agenda again? I thought we've already approved this. H.
Personnel, H?
Yeah. Yes.
There's just 3 new ones. From the extracurricular committee, if I can help. They were not previously approved, so we now have positions for them.
Thank you.
Okay, now finance, A through E, questions or comments? Other business, I'm sorry.
E?
E?
Since the board never asks questions about this, I always do. Mr. Fitzgerald, can you give us an update on this item?
What I will do is I will get the analysis from my colleague, Mr. Comer, who assisted Mr. Fink, and I will make sure that that analysis is shared with the board. So they'll see the decision to resolve this matter.
Mr. Jackson, is there something I can answer for you on that one? We did briefly talk about this at finance last week.
No, I just want to get an update from the solicitor.
Thank you.
Okay, other business, A through D, questions or comments?
On A, could you please attach the actual documents as opposed to a hyperlink? I think for the purpose of our official records, we're going to need that because there will be changes, I'm sure, that are made at some point. So for version control, I think it would be important that we actually have the document attached.
Okay. Any other questions there?
The other question I had is on B, or actually, I apologize, C. So the routes that we were in receipt of that were somewhere around 400 pages or something to that effect appeared to me to be those routes that are planned for the reopening phase. Obviously, it was the total package. Are the routes that are currently in process included in that package? So for example, students that may be going to Western Center at this point, are those routes currently in that packet at this time?
I mean, I can answer with regard to these routes. This was actually something that has been picked up in a number of districts over the last couple of years through the audit process that you have to simply outline what your routes may be. So presumably your routes for purposes of Western, other routes are embedded within what are a lot of pages of routes. So that's something that auditors have been picking up on over the last couple of years.
But the routes that we're using today for Western Center and for non-public are different. And this is a question, are they different than what they will be upon reopening?
They may be, and you can change them. Again, this
so
is
we just have to approve what
you just have to approve this. So
Thank
the
you.
auditor says, okay, you've done that.
It's another one of those meaningless things from PDE. The question I have related to that is if routes change throughout the year, is there periodically that we have to show a record that we received updated routes or anything? And the other question I have is the same for B related to the bus drivers.
No. And what I generally would recommend, and we can modify this when it's approved, is that this is subject to change from time to time, and whatever those routes and or individuals are available for inspection upon review.
Okay, thank you.
All right, down to discussion item. We're back to project management services. I did. Absolutely. So we can discuss it. I guess my question, Dr. Gooden, is I believe our discussions with the project management in both the property committee and the ad hoc, the mention of it there is really to pull the moving parts together. So I'd really like to know what is your recommendation and what is your team's recommendation in terms of actually spending those dollars and hiring a project manager. Is that something that is needed to create and execute a plan to get back to school?
I would say yes. The only thing I would ask, I see it's a discussion item, but in talking to my team today, we would prefer that we not wait till the 28th to act on it, though. I'd prefer that if we're going to do it, we need to do it now so that we can get rolling with this, because as we just had this discussion, we got a lot of things cooking right now, and we'd want to bring them on board because it sounds like it also is going to help the community to see something like that. So yeah, we want to move forward with this.
Dr. Gooden, in property, this was an action item.
It's what?
So I don't know how it came to an item of discussion. I was real clear. Mr. Hunter was very clear that this was an actual item for the board's approval. And to wait 2 weeks from now is being short-sighted.
It actually absolutely came to a discussion item, Mr. Jackson, because you let me know that you were not going to continue to explore that in property. At which point I took it off as an agenda item, as a motion, and made it a discussion item. And that was very clear to me, and that's why it was made that. If there wasn't going to be agreement to move forward, perhaps we needed to discuss it in work session and then vote on it in board meeting, which is our policy or our protocol or our procedure, whatever it is you want to call it, for items such as this.
I met with Mr. Hunter today, and he and I discussed this, and like I said, if we're going to move in this direction, we do see the benefit of it, as long as the administrative team would definitely need to be involved in the development of that document, but we don't want to wait till the 28th to do it, though. We'd rather get them on board and start working with them, because, as I said, we got a lot of things moving right now.
So, Mr. Jackson, did I hear you say that a proposal was received last week?
Yes, I think either Thursday or Friday.
Okay, and do we know where that, Dr. Gooden, do you know where that contract is at this point? Has it been reviewed? Have you seen it? Has Mr. Fitzgerald seen it? I mean, this is, it's a really tough spot to be in, to not know. I certainly understand your needs without question, and I think it's important that we act on those needs as quickly as possible, but I think we need to be prudent. I haven't seen that contract. I have no idea what numbers we're talking about. I have no idea. Microphone.
I think the number they were looking at is $8,100.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, that sounds like what I heard.
Yeah,
And it's
$8,100.
It's a professional service, so we don't.
Right. He's already on the contract here.
Okay, thank you. I mean, because again, that was the first.
So and again, I apologize for missing the committee, but for $8,100, and this is something that could help you, help everyone.
As long as we do it quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, let's rock and roll here.
I move to.
Well, we should put the motion back on then.
I'm making the motion right now. I move that we approve moving forward with the project management for the reopening plan.
Second.
We do need to open up for public comment.
Any questions or comments from the board?
This will be one of the smarter decisions we've made in a while. We need to move on this. There is great benefit across the board for all stakeholders. And for $8,100, this shouldn't even be a discussion like this. And Madam President, you are correct, because I was informed that there was some concerns about bringing them on board, and I was just tired of banging my head against the wall. So I appreciate that we put it back on the agenda for an actual item.
Okay, are there any public comments in the room? Anything on the Zoom?
We have one hand raised, OOD. You may now make public comment. Please unmute yourself, first and last name and full address, please.
Hi, good evening. This is Olga O'Donnell, 224 Hudson Drive in Oaks, Pennsylvania. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm very grateful for the update on the special education front. I'm a parent of a child with an IEP, and I certainly want to take him.
I'm sorry. This is only public comment specifically on the idea of bringing a project manager on board.
Is there a reason why I can't comment on the other agenda item for the special education plan?
This time it's on this specific agenda item, as this, not even agenda item, this motion is being added to the agenda. You can save your comment for public comment at the end, please.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
That's
Thank
okay.
you.
That's all right. Thank you.
Sorry, my misunderstanding. There are no other hands raised at this time on this issue.
Okay, thank you. So all in favor, say
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Any other board comment this evening?
I would just like to thank Dr. Gooden and his staff, Dr. Gooden individually, and then your team behind you for the courage to continue this work and also agreeing to, get down to making this plan to begin bringing our elementary kids back. So just want to say thank you.
I just wanted to share, I've just had a lot of outpouring of public who've been very happy with the kids virtually in the last short week and day. I've gotten a lot of good comments from parents from a wide range of grades. And I just had one little part of an email. I'd like to share a little bit about our experience after the first week of school with virtual learning. I have 4 children, grades K to 8. We have had contact with more than 20 teachers across 3 schools within 4 grades in just the first days. All of our interactions with teachers, main teachers, specials, learning support have been positive, enthusiastic, patient, and kind. The teachers are working hard to connect and engage my students in their classes on a platform that's new to them and us, which has not functioned properly at all times. They've modeled the very best our district has to offer. They've communicated frequently, it's responded to questions and concerns quickly and effectively. They're making connections with students. They're making a positive impact. While we did have some struggles technologically with Canvas and Zoom, I can see that the framework being built for what is going to be an exceptional school year. And she continues, but I've heard a lot of great stuff like this. And my daughter's doing fabulously. So I just want to really shout out to the teachers who are just our greatest and most amazing resource, and to the administration and everyone in curriculum and technology, everybody involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I think it's been a rewarding experience from a number of people that I've heard from. Of course, there's going to be some glitches and there's going to be some bumps in the road, but that's to be expected. It's only been a couple of days, and I think the rollout has been amazingly smooth and much better than the Google Classroom last year. So I'm also very pleased with Canvas and how that's working at this point. I do have 2 other things for board comment. One of those is that I had asked Ms. Fern to reach out to everyone about doing a board retreat. I do think we tried to plan this for February, March, right when COVID hit, so it didn't happen. But I really would like to do it. I think it's important, especially after this very difficult time that we've been traveling through together, that we begin to, think a little bit harder, reflect a little bit more on our own behaviors, our language with each other, and really discuss, conflict management style. We hear a lot of people complaining that there's a lot of bickering, and we can go back and say that we're debating, but it's hard when people are huffing and puffing too. But, the bickering back and forth, the bantering, probably not the best way to go about some things. So I'd be willing to say, hey, let's try it. Let's do it. We're going to be together for a while. We're going to go through more things over time. So there were 2 dates that were proposed. I don't know that they worked for everyone. I do believe there is a 3rd date. Is that correct, Dr. Gooden? The 1st Saturday of November? It is. So if you could just respond to Ms. Fern, if that date would possibly work for you. I'd love to have as many people as involved as possible to make that a rewarding experience for us all. And then the other piece is, again, through my contacts with the other board presidents in the area, I'm learning that the Montgomery County and the Chester counties, and as Tom said earlier, you can go on those websites. There's lots of information. There's lots of information that's being shared at their board meetings. So I wondered if we could try again to see, I appreciate the CHOP doctors coming. It was great, but I'd also like to hear from the Montgomery County public officials to see if it's possible if they could come out and talk to us. And I think as part of the whole planning piece, we need to establish what our threshold is on the metrics. Is it going to be if you're less than 5%? Like, let's hear from them and incorporate that or include that in our planning process. So not sure if that would be possible, but I would like to.
I reached out to them today.
Oh, great. Okay, wonderful. That's all I have for board comment. Anybody else? Guys, it's only 10:30, 10:25. Oh, okay, that's right. What was I saying? Okay. All right then. Public to be heard. Anybody in-house?
Hi, Mary Jo McNamara, 187 Abbey Drive, Royersford, PA. So a couple of things tonight, right? So the special needs presentation was fabulous. Thank you so much for providing things like next steps, tasks, dates, challenges, your risks. You were given an opportunity to say what you needed. All of the things that we're looking for the opening, for our whole community. I know it's a much larger scale, but that was outstanding. So thank you. You even actually provided an expanded scope. You included the 504s and the ELLs, or at least you're starting to look at them, right? I think the idea of having students in class with the teacher while the teacher's present was a great idea. Why not compel the teachers of special needs students to be in the school? That way, if there's a special needs student that has a class with the teacher, that teacher's there, even if they have to do it virtually while in the classroom. I think the communication does need to be addressed. I think we missed it a little bit. The thing that I heard in the ad hoc committee meeting this week was that there were a lot of ideas that were flown around specifically to curriculum. And we don't know, the public doesn't know what the curriculum committee looked at. You know, we're saying things like block learning or scattering the classrooms or scattering the hallway times. And we don't know that you've already looked at that. So I think that's the kind of communication we need. I don't know why we didn't let 9 people in the room tonight. I think that's one of the places where I talk about taking 2 steps backwards. That was a space where we just took 2 steps backwards. You're establishing distrust in your board. That's all you're doing. Those people are on the phone. They were out there. They could have come in. There are 42 days left till November 12th, 42 business days. You have blockers of capacity, staffing, transportation. I'm gonna lump this in, PPE, maintenance, hygiene, ventilation, nursing, whatever you want to call that grouping, right? So that allows about 10 business days for each one of those things to be resolved. I don't know how that's going to happen. Mr. Rizzo sounded like we had it all planned out. You had great, your report was excellent. It sounded really good. I hope that what we're not going to see is K through 4 back in school November 12th and everybody else has to wait. So I'm really anxious to hear what Dr. Gooden and you are going to come up with for trying to look at what the detail of the elementary schools look like.
Okay, we've hit 3 minutes.
Oh, thanks. I never did that before. Thanks.
Anyone else in-house? Do we have any hands raised?
We have a couple. First up is OOD. You may have any public comment. Please use first and last name, full address, and your comment, please.
Hi, this is Olga O'Donnell, 224 Hudson Drive in Oaks, PA. I'm sorry earlier for jumping the gun and commenting on the wrong section. Just want to add quickly, I definitely agree with Ms. Scazzini's earlier comment that the communication, the lack of communication can sometimes make parents feel very frantic, and just knowing that plans are underway goes a great long way towards alleviating a lot of that frantic state. So I really hope that everybody in the room there takes that to heart. And I also want to thank Dr. Gooden for pointing out where the health and safety information resides on the website. So I'm a parent of a child with an IEP, and I certainly appreciate the presentation that was made tonight about the plans. I appreciate the tentative nature of the plans, but the one thing that still strikes me is that fundamentally, it's not quite in-person instruction, it's virtual instruction with in-person support. And those two things are not quite the same thing. There are kids with IEPs, and from my standpoint, my son falls into that category, that simply do not get a whole lot out of Zoom, even if they are technically present. So the question of whether that kind of education is appropriate for kids like that is still very much an outstanding question. So yes, bring those kids in, but if all that they're going to do is sit in front of a computer, which is what they're doing at home or in their virtual learning centers or what have you, there still is a very big question as to the adequacy of that kind of educational environment. And I think it's a good start to say that if there is time left over for the teacher to engage more in person with these kids at the end of a lesson, that will be available. But I just want to put out there that that's a start. That's not the end all be all. I would suggest that some thought be given to building time in for direct in-person small group instruction as a supplement to virtual learning, and in particular for the kids who are just not going to get a whole lot of sitting in front of Zoom relative to a typical normal multisensory classroom experience. A couple of other options, again, in addition to building time in for direct small group in-person instruction. If you have an ad hoc committee of parents to make plans for reopening, can you have an ad hoc subcommittee of parents of kids with special needs? Because one of the things that was frustrating to me is that there were red, yellow, green plans earlier on, and then there were special ed plans as sort of a second tier, second track of a plan. And that's very frustrating because I don't want my child to be viewed as a second-class citizen at Springford. He isn't under the law. So can those plans, can the ad hoc committee have a special subcommittee dedicated specifically to the needs of special ed kids, so that that planning can be more on the same track as the planning for everyone else? I'm not making these comments to cause more indigestion. I'm not.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next up is Lindsay Olenowski. Lindsay, please unmute yourself, first and last name and full address, please.
Lindsay Olenowski, 26 Pin Oak Drive, Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. I would just like to ask that when Dr. Gooden or Mr. Rizzo, whomever makes their presentation in 2 weeks' time, that a couple points are clarified. One being, if my child is forced to quarantine, not because he tested positive, but he was in proximity to someone at school, his desk is 3 feet away and now he must quarantine, how is he going to receive an education while he's at home? Because I feel like that's a component as a parent I don't understand, especially if this is because of someone else within the classroom, which it happens, but I need to know the education he's going to receive. The other thing is, how does the district plan to enforce people being honest about their potential COVID exposure? I know already in some of these sports clubs in the area, parents have knowingly sent their child to practice when they were exposed, and then that child has tested positive later, which then has a domino effect on, in our case, if it was the school, it would be more students who have to quarantine, potentially bus drivers, teachers, etc. And so I feel like those are really important points that we need to understand, and what the district is going to do to make sure that parents are behaving appropriately and being honest in the situations within their homes, and therefore lessening the exposure potential. Aside from that, I had a really great first week with my kids. They really are just happy to be even part of school. So kudos to their teachers. Really, really appreciate it. And I hope that you all continue to move forward positively. So thank you.
Next up is Joseph Salazzo. Joseph, please unmute yourself, first and last name and full address, please.
Sure. Joseph Salazzo, 44 Woodley Drive, Limerick, PA. I just want to go back to the survey results for a second here. You had a 65% response rate, which is phenomenal in terms of surveying. Like, that was just completely glazed over 5,000 families responding. And of those responding, 73% want to have their teachers. And that was kind of thrown to the wayside to focus on the minority responses, which need to be addressed. I'm in full agreement with that, but it was kind of just thrown aside that, well, most of these parents want their kids to be back with their teachers, but we got to focus on this other piece over here. So it's frustrating to see it always going back to how do we make everybody happy, not necessarily focusing on the majority of the students and the majority of the students' needs. I'm happy to hear that a lot of kids have had great first weeks with school. That's awesome. My kids, not as much. They're struggling with Zoom a little bit. They're struggling with the technology. They still feel disconnected from their friends. So whatever the board and the administration can do, I mean, to Dr. Gooden's point, he has reopening plans in yellow and green. His team worked all summer on those pieces. We're moderate spread right now for the community. We could be in hybrid tomorrow, how I understand things. So I think we need to be more focused on moving forward and stop using that four-letter word plan as much, and just actually get into the doing pieces. That's all. Thank you.
Next up is Gabrielle Deerdorf. Gabrielle, please unmute yourself, first and last name, full address, and your public comment, please.
Hi, this is Gabrielle Deerdorf, 704 Collin Court in Royersford. I just wanted to comment on kind of themes that came up a lot today was confidence and trust building. I actually over the past few months, as we've all been spending all this time together, have gained more confidence in the school board, making the correct decisions, following the correct data. But when meetings continually question state mandates, masks, and social distancing, and bizarre conspiracy theory things, it concerns me about that confidence and trust staying. You guys, the administration, the school board, the parents, the grandparents, the children, everybody did amazing last week. I am so proud of what we have all done together because we've all spent a lot of time on this. This is never going to compare to normal school. It's never going to be the same, but everybody, just as other speakers have said, have been so amazing, supportive, a sense of community, a sense of pride in what we have put out there. And so I am really proud of all of us for doing that together. I also just one last thing, when you guys are going through your different committees, as someone new to following school board meetings, it's very hard to follow all of your numbers and facts as you're talking very fast. And there's no PowerPoints. So for the finance committee, a lot of numbers spoken about there. I really couldn't follow because I didn't have anything to look at. Same with the survey results and a lot of the information Mr. Rizzo said. I know they're coming in minute to minute, so I respect that, but it just would be a little bit helpful going forward as we're in this virtual setting to have some graphics behind some of your committee updates. Thank you so much.
Next up is Sarah. Sarah, please unmute yourself, first and last name and full address, please, and then your public comment. Thank you.
Hello, it's Sarah Denoris. I live at 3 Buckley Circle in Royersford. Regarding the survey, one shortcoming of the survey I think you should consider is that the directions preceding the survey did not indicate that a virtual option would be available or that it would be developed, and only families who selected no on the first question were given the second question, which asked whether the family would choose cyber or want a live virtual option. I also know many people who didn't answer the survey at all, rather sending an email because they had unanswered questions about the procedures that would be in place. And I know many people who answered yes, that they would send their students back to school essentially as a placeholder for the data collection, kind of with the idea that you would then develop a plan that would accommodate the most students. I just want you to be aware of some of these thought processes behind the answers to the survey. And I think that if you were to commit to offering a live virtual option after the buildings reopen, you'd find that many families would choose that option. I also have concerns about the survey being a Google form. With future surveys, I hope, especially if it's a binding one, that you please use Skyward so that the results are valid, as was done with the busing, the transportation survey. Also, I'd like to see much less debate about the calendar date to return to school. It has been debated, and it was decided as November 12th. As Mrs. Zazowski said, I think it's necessary to give more consideration of the necessary public health metrics, leave the date alone, plan out the logistics, and in the meantime, observe and learn from the special education department as they implement their phased plan. Lastly, I'd just like to say a big thank you to all the teachers, especially at Brook Elementary. I think everyone has done a fantastic job implementing this first week of school. And I hope that we can move forward getting even better with it. Thanks.
Next up is Jill Shadler. Jill, please unmute yourself, first and last name and full address, please.
Hi, Jill Shadler, 247 Hafner Road in Royersford, PA. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am pleased to hear Mr. Rizzo and Mr. Gooden for the first time in months sound positive. I'm baffled that it took this long to simply send one question, it was not a survey, task out for parents to provide the data to make you feel more positive in your planning. So that was a good step in this meeting, just done a little bit too late. I would also like to suggest that the board develop some type of pre-meeting in order to better align on topics, for example, such as the budget, instead of taking up time in this forum and the public's time on those items where you have questions, you're disagreeing, or perhaps have misunderstandings with each other. And last, I will send this in an email question format because I went to the ad hoc meeting and was told it was not the forum, and the board meeting was. However, I've never heard a direct question answered in the board meeting. But my comment and question will be directed to two specific board members. Again, I will send an email to Mrs. Sullivan and Mrs. Earl. And I would like to know, based on the presentation of the Special Education Low Incident Student Department, which was fabulous and demonstrated a well thought out and organized approach, could each of you please respond with why you have not spoken up or specifically asked the administration for a similar type plan in any of the board meetings since July? Thank you.
Next up is Michael Lebedinsky. Michael, please unmute yourself. First and last name and full address, please.
Hi, this is Michael Lebedinsky, 2005 Willowwood Drive in Royersford. Firstly, my gratitude to Mr. Rizzo for presenting this parent survey results. Very, very timely and informative. It was gratifying to hear that a supermajority of parents in the district have made a rational, fact and science-based decision concerning the education of their children. These latest results also completely dispel the notion that the first survey sent out was not accurate. To the contrary, the new survey shows that parents' choice was underrepresented in the first survey. I'm glad to see that the survey situation is now corrected and the board did not fall for the temptation to delay the survey as some had advocated. But sad to see that the board did not heed the clear guidance provided by the parents in the first survey and wasted weeks in endless debate as in the absence of sorely needed data. I can't even count on my fingers how many times I heard Dr. Gooden positively refer to now having the data, so that's great. Secondly, wanted to give a quick update on the senior pre-tailgate tailgate. It was held safely and not a single COVID case, infection, hospitalization, or death resulted. Yet another in the growing list of your fears, which have consistently not come to fruition. Frankly, there are just too many to count at this point. At some point, I hope you will stop ignoring the readily available data and facts. Mr. DeBella has frequently referred to the Montgomery County site, great resource, and realize that history has proven your fears to be unfounded and irrational and potentially harmful to our children. Lastly, I found it comical that 6 members of the board would make a distinction between the federal court's Eastern and Western District of Pennsylvania to prevent parents from attending the board meeting in person. So I will read for the record a portion of Judge Stickman's order today so the Springford community understands the judge's order. The court holds and declares that the congregate gathering limits imposed by the governor's mitigation orders violate the right of the right of assembly enshrined in the First Amendment, and that the stay-at-home order and business closure components of the governor's order violate the due process clause of the 14th Amendment and equally violate the equal protection clause of the 14th. The court closes this opinion as it began, recognizing that defendants' actions in issue here were undertaken with the good intention of addressing public health emergency, but even in an emergency, the authority of government is not unfettered. The liberties protected by the Constitution are not fair weather freedoms in place when times are good, but able to be simply cast aside in times of trouble. There is no question that the country has faced emergencies of every sort, but the solution to a national crisis can never be permitted to supersede a commitment to individual liberty that stands as a foundation of the American experiment. The Constitution cannot accept the concept of a new normal where the basic liberties of the people can be subordinated to open-ended emergency mitigation measures. Rather, the Constitution sets certain lines that may not be crossed, even in an emergency. Thank you.
Next up is A. Johnson. A. Johnson, please unmute yourself. First and last name and full address, please.
My name's Alana Johnson. I live at 3 Iroquois Drive in Royersford. I want to first start by saying that I have a kindergartner in Mrs. McClary's class, and I'm amazed, as a teacher, I'm amazed that she can keep these little guys focused and positive about school, that she is doing it, as it sounds like are all of your teachers. I'm actually wanted to say that I think tonight the board should be ashamed of yourselves. This is the third time, if I'm not mistaken, that I have heard you discount your administrative team and your teachers, the work that they've put into trying to get to the finish line that you've given them. And then you change where the finish line is and you give them a new task. Tonight, Dr. Krakauer was very clear when you asked if pushing the date for bringing just a small portion of the population back would cause indigestion. Then Mr. Rizzo was even more clear about his feelings on it. And then you decided to, instead of doing that, let's bring back all of K-4 earlier. Give us 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, give us a plan for that. One of the community members said there are 42 business days left before November 11th, but for some reason, you all think that we can bring back K-4 before that time. I think you bullied Dr. Gooden into agreeing to get you that plan, and I'm ashamed for you. That's all.
There are no more hands raised at this time. Thank you.
All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.